And we are live for episode 400.
Wow.
It is October 18th, 2020. I'm JD Duran. The first time we are ever doing this in our show's history. Hopefully nothing goes wrong.
No promises on that front.
We shall see about that. I'm obviously joined by my great co-host and friend, Brendan Cassidy. But we are also joined this week. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see them. You can see all of us. We are joined by...
I don't know if this is something that we should be promoting right now.
And we're joined by Ryan and Jay for episode 400 as well.
Hello,
fellas. Everyone. How are you all doing?
Doing well.
Doing
okay. A couple of faces for radio here, but happy to expose ourselves to the world.
I feel like the magician's secret has just been revealed.
400 episodes later, our faces are finally revealed.
This is who we are. Yes, we are revealing our faces. I'm mostly concerned about the tech side of this. I just hope nothing goes wrong.
JD's doing the Wilson from Home Improvement style, where you can only see.
I gotta make sure people can hear me. Okay,
that's exactly right. Yeah, a true pro through and through.
JD, I do hope your friend in the background doesn't interfere. Though.
Yeah, I have.
You have Teen Wolf. Is that Teen Wolf there?
Yeah, Sam's friend Wolfie is here joining me this evening, as this is a Halloween special as well.
I'm half expecting him to just randomly start moving just to scare all of us or something like that. Like this is some type of prank.
Well, if you do see me just bolt out of the room randomly, you'll know why.
That's why. Okay.
So it'll be because of that. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's good to know.
So what are we doing on episode 400? We teased this last week on the show, but the first segment, we are going to be celebrating the history of InSession film. That's typically what we like to do on these celebratory episodes. Maybe we'll focus a little bit on the last 100 episodes and talk about how things have changed and evolved since the last time we got together to do one of these. And then, of course, the big ticket getaway here is that we are doing another movie draft. And as we announced last week, we're talking about franchises. There is some criteria that goes into that. We'll discuss later.
Not fully defined yet. It might be fully defined as we start making picks.
Yeah, we may argue about some of that but as we go. But behind the scenes, we think we worked it out. We'll see how things go. But we will be doing a movie draft talking franchises. But first, we're gonna celebrate InSession film, 400 episodes. I would have never have foreseen this happening at all. For new listeners of the show, just a brief history. This is something that we started in 2013, in January of 2013. It was me and my best friend, Nate Parsons, who was a co-host on the show for that year. And it was a great time. At the end of 2013, Nate bolted. He had life stuff. He went off, got married and whatnot.
You said bolted like he had no passion for this whatsoever.
No, Nate's great. I love Nate.
He couldn't handle it.
I hope he's watching right now. I love you, Nate. You're great. So once Nate left, then the late, great Blake Pertuzzi joined me as a co-host in 2014. Brennan joined as the co-host of Extra Film in 2014. And that was a really fun year. At the end of that year, Blake had to leave for health reasons. And then Brennan stepped in as the main show co-host and double dipped on extra film for 2 years or so. It felt like
we both
just you and I.
It was a busy time. A busy time.
Yeah, it was a busy time.
Lunatics.
And then
yes, lunatics.
In hindsight,
a week.
In hindsight, I have no idea how we did that. Blows my mind.
At the time, you also didn't have a really active son.
That's
you
true.
did have a son,
Yeah.
but he was, sleeping half the time.
Yeah. Sam was really young. It was a little bit different then, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And then we had Vince Leo come on, or actually Matt Neglia, I think, was the first co-host to come on for Extra Film for a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we had Matt Oakes for a while
Matt
too, from
Oakes.
Silver
Yeah,
Screen
that's right.
Riot. Yeah, I
Matt
believe
Oakes.
he actually predated Matt Neglia, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that is correct. And then after the Matts left, then we had Vince Leo, who came on for like a year, and he was really great. I love Vince.
Yeah.
And then these two lovely gentlemen, Ryan and Jay, came on in what 2018 that you guys came on to start Extra Film?
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
Because Brendan and I were talking a little bit earlier. I want to say it was like right before, like maybe the summer before we did episode 300.
Yeah.
Because I think we discussed the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and then we kind of had like a celebration of sorts there.
Where Ryan spouted a bunch of terrible opinions about
the bad movie. There were 100 episodes, and it's still a bad movie.
Yeah. So
can you tell that these guys get along and they're on Extra Film together for a reason?
Yeah. So I guess as we kind of go on here celebrating, InSession film, I actually want to kick it over to Ryan and Jay. I want to hear your guys' experience of doing the show. For those that listen to Extra Film, you'll notice that this year has been quite different than how it's been previously. I'm curious to hear you guys talk more about the evolution of Extra Film, what it's been like for you, and how things have gotten to where it's at now.
I mean, for me, it's kind of crazy. I mean, I think I've told this before, and maybe if I haven't, then this is the real first time. But I actually invited JD on as a guest on my old podcast that I used to do, but way before this, 3 years ago.
Yeah,
and I had a bunch of other guests on, and like felt like me and JD were the only ones talking on that show. And surprise to any listeners out there.
That's rule number one.
You guys were very on brand.
Yeah. That's rule number one for defining how you can actually get along with someone on InSession film specifically. You can't shut up. That's the first rule.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, I was talking with JD, and it just worked out. And then he's like, "Hey, would you want to kind of come on Extra Film and start doing it, and be a part of the team and everything?" Because I believe you had put out a call to arms to see if people wanted to apply and stuff. And I know that I had also talked with Neglia about joining his team, but Matt passed, and I was JD's, I guess, fortune or misfortune or whatever you want to call it, JD. And so I went on. I actually didn't even talk to JD the first night. It was actually me and Brendan, which was great. I was terrible on that show. Usually the first ones you ever do of these, whether it's the main show that I did with you guys or Extra Film, like I go back and I listen to them, it's hot garbage. I mean, I wish I can go back and redo those episodes if I could, even though I don't want to rewatch probably the films that we did, and whatever they were. And it just so happened that I started getting a DM from that guy on my screen, Mr. Ledbetter up there, about doing his old show. And Jay was like, "Yeah, come on and talk with me for like, an hour maybe." And we had to talk about Tarantino, and we talked about his whole filmography for like a combined 9 hours?
It was like 8 or 9. It was 8 or 9.
It was probably going to just be an hour, and then it ended up being that long because it just worked. And I tell people this all the time: you only strike lightning in a bottle so many times. And I mean, JD and Brendan do such a great job working opposite one another. I would have never thought in my wildest dreams, because I've never met Jay. I never knew Jay before any of this. And I'm so grateful that I have him in my life. Even though, I drive him nuts and he drives me nuts. And then we have fun driving JD nuts with the editing of Extra Film. So that's always fun. But yeah, man, it's been crazy.
Outtakes are insane.
I mean, they are. There are nights where he cannot stop making me laugh.
I wish I could release half the stuff that you guys.
We would be fired if you released it, JD. There's no way we could do that.
From our real life jobs.
Yeah, from our this and that. There's no way that happened. But no, I just I mean, we've done over 100 episodes of Extra Film now, and
it was true? Wow.
Yeah, we've done over 100 episodes of Extra Film at this point. I mean, if there have been 100 episodes in between this in the last time we were on. We've done over 100 episodes of extra film,
100.
and it was Jay's idea to do the movie series and kind of change up the format.
It was a great idea too.
And
it led to some of your best discussions you guys have ever had.
Exactly. Though I do think it led to the pandemic. And that is confirmed because
everyone wants to listen about people talk about older movies. So the pandemic came out and said,
how do we do that?
That's true. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but it's been great.
Our Robert Altman series set a world record for most podcast listens. I don't know if our listeners know that or not, but
something like that.
Was it just you guys listening to yourselves over and over again?
It may be that.
That's exactly right.
That may be true. I was like, man, I sound wonderful.
Yeah. For once. But in all seriousness, though, I know we're joking around about this a lot because JD and I went through what felt like a pretty extensive search, trying to find some new bodies for extra film that we felt like were not just appropriate to communicate with us, JD and myself specifically, but just that we felt like can get along together with whatever two we actually focused on. And
for almost 2 years. Like literally years,
it went back and forth a lot. It was a long process. And I think where I noticed, it was one of your earlier episodes, Jay and Ryan, where you guys talked about Martin Scorsese's The Departed. I think that was sometime within the first month or so of
that was one of the early ones. Yeah. Cause we did, we did a couple of throwback episodes for whatever year that was.
It was, yeah. And my first thought hearing that final product was, okay, JD and I did good. We got the right people for this.
Yeah.
And then about a month and a half after that, you were like, we'll see how this goes.
It was pretty short-lived. You just beat me to the punch at what point I was going to try and make.
Well, I remember one of my earliest episodes was with Brendan. And if you've listened to the dynamics on the show, I think it's fair to say that Ryan and JD are the more long-winded of the hosts on their respected shows.
You're welcome.
And so Brendan and I did.
That is Brendan's fault. I blame a lot of this on Brendan.
That's exactly right. Yes,
because
100%.
And here's why. I think I might have talked about this in episode 300, so you have to forgive me if this is redundant. But if you go back and listen to me on the show pre Brendan being there, and I'm kind of like you, Ryan, in the sense that in a lot of ways, I want to delete those episodes because they're really rough by today's standards.
They really are.
But back then, I was way more concise with how I spoke and how I talked, and if anything, to get up to even half of what I do now, I feel or trying to think of things, because Nate is so the antithesis of me in that he's very brief. He can talk for 20 seconds and then be done on something. And I love you, Nate. Again, if you're listening, I love that about you.
It's just a very different conversational style.
It is. So to kind of keep the conversation going with Nate and to have a back and forth, I felt like I also had to be pretty brief and concise. And so you listen to those shows, and I'm not really all that long-winded at all. Then Brennan comes on, and compared to where I was then, he was very articulate and would go on longer than even I was.
I'll drink to that.
And so at that time, I felt like in order for me to keep up with Brendan, I was like, I'm going to have to up my game. So
that's so funny you say that, because I felt like I went the opposite direction. I was way more long-winded at the time. And then I realized it.
You reversed.
And then I completely backtracked. Yeah. Because I used to never take notes for shows. I never did that.
Yeah.
And then I started doing that just so I can start trailing back a little bit. So I can, get more concise and focus on the things I want.
But that's how that got started for me is I started writing out my notes a little bit more. I tried to get more detailed. I would think about the movies longer. So that way I'd have more thoughtful responses to what Brendan was saying. A side effect of that meant that I went on longer tangents compared to what it was before. I'm still in the process of rolling things back, apparently. Like Brendan's already done that part of it, so I'm a few years behind the curve there. So
I timed our spiels during our top 10 episode of, what was it, 2019, I think it was, and just to see what all of our averages were. But I guess to get back to your point, Jay, that you were making, you're right that whenever you and I get together on a show, it ends up being you and I would be the ones to get together to do something less than an hour long.
Yeah.
Well, the
Brennan
one
and I-
review that I remember was the searching review, and I swear to God that review was like
Oh.
18 minutes. It was like 18 minutes long. I mean,
That
it
was extremely short.
it was
I remember
so
that.
short.
You know, to
And,
be fair, however you feel about that movie is
Yeah.
fair, but there's not a whole lot to talk about with it.
that is true. I mean, if there was a movie where that would happen, I guess it would be that one. But
Yeah.
certainly, I remember. I think JD sent us a text that day and was just like, "I'm pretty sure this is the shortest review in the history of the show." So just so you guys know,
But Jay,
and that's when he was like, "I don't know if this guy is the one for this." But you know, I had done the Tarantino shows with Ryan, so I knew what I was in for. I knew that we would never have too short of a review. Although I have had some.
Yes.
15 straight minute nonsense that I've pulled. At certain
I was
points,
gonna
so.
say, like, I've
Yeah.
noticed, especially this year, since you guys have been doing these
Yeah.
movie series, that Jay is now becoming more and more like Ryan, and he's very capable of going on for 6 minutes at a time.
Look, we all
Certainly
know.
my opening comments on some of these movies that I've loved, I can get a little too long, but
There's a few 7-minuters, some 8-minuters in there,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's, you know,
I
it's,
think
it's when, it's when you're passionate.
my shortcuts one. I certainly did not take any shortcuts in that opening
No.
statement. That was
Yeah.
It was as long as that movie.
that one was a little long. Also
a
a masterpiece,
15-minute
but
intro.
certainly very very long.
No, I mean, I remember last year doing our bonus content for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and getting so many text messages from JD of, "This is 8 minutes long. This is 8 minutes long." And then realizing
you were,
the
that was
floodgates would
bonus
open,
content,
baby.
so it's not quite as didn't matter
Yeah.
quite as much. But yeah, you were going
But then,
ham on that one.
Jay almost like having a seizure during Portrait of a Lady on Fire, and
Yeah,
like
that was great.
getting
Yeah.
as loud and hyped up as anything that was in Uncut Gems when we did the Uncut Gems review.
Yeah.
I mean, like even some of these recent ones that we've just done over the last couple of weeks with Fincher. I mean, you know, as the more and more we've talked about them, and it's probably because we're a little bit more familiar with them, but we do have a lot of things to say because the films have so much to them. I mean, I think of a film last year that JD and I did on the main show when we did Parasite together. That movie has just so much to
love
talk
that
about.
review.
To
Yeah.
put the two people that will talk for hours on end together for that review is kind of perfect, but it's also like, good Lord, for JD being the editor there, that is going to be a nightmare. And then, of course, we did it with Terminator Dark
I was just
Fate,
going to
where I
say,
was
you
like,
lump that with the complete antithesis of that review.
exactly. Where I'm like, it sucks. Move on. Move
Yeah.
on. That's it. That's, yeah. I could have told
That
you
was a
before I
good
even watched
review.
this movie. You know what I mean? So
That was a fun review to do, though, and I guess kind of on kind of building off the momentum of what you guys are talking about there. I feel like, and feel free to disagree if you guys feel this way, but I feel like one of the best things to come out of the last 100 episodes is Jay's ethos of movies. That
I feel like that's
I
up
love
there.
him. I don't know. I mean, I love him. I think
Controversial
JD
opinion.
Tears was spawned, I believe, by Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah,
was Ryan.
that's
Yeah.
included.
check, folks. Still
Yeah.
waiting. We're gonna get that
Still
T-shirt.
waiting.
I promise.
Yeah. So
I
that
promise you
means
get that
that
t-shirt.
means Ryan and I are still waiting for our thing. You know,
You need some
that-
trademarks. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
I have no idea, and I'm
You guys don't
afraid
have
that
any
it will
action
be.
figure catchphrases yet.
Not yet.
You need to get those.
I have to work on that.
Yeah, I'll have to just start Well, I mean, we did have the bit, but that was more of your bit, Jay. That you know, I would kick it to you, and then now we've retired the bit of.
Yeah. The bonus
So,
content thing that had a
we-
long life, but
we've had
unfortunately,
a
I
long.
no longer
Yeah,
seeing at
that's
the
how
end of
long
every
we've known
episode.
we've been together. Is that we had over 100 episodes of Jay doing various bonus, sort of content things. So
Yeah,
and that was
just ran out of steam, man.
yeah. Well, I mean, that was one person's opinion, and I've been crying about it every day since. But yeah, no, I mean, that's even spawned it where I've done it on the main show, and then I've just said bonus, and then like I've moved on to the next thing, and then JD's just like start laughing in the background because he knows what I'm doing. I mean, so I don't know. This last sort of couple of years, I mean, we've had so many wonderful things that have happened. Not just for us four on the show. I mean, within our time, we've had so many writers and so many different people come on the show for podcasts. We've had so many interesting discussions. We've had people go to festivals, for the website. We've had interviews with extraordinary filmmakers, and we've had a pandemic. And so I'm just saying we've had an amazing 3-year run. So this is the end of InSession Film, right? So therefore, rate, review, subscribe for the last. Oh wait, no, that's not what we're doing.
As you say that, I was almost afraid everything was just going to cut out and like someone's internet was going to crash, and then it was all of our viewers live would think, "Oh, are they serious right now?"
No, we're not. We're just joking.
And then that wolf in the background just comes and slices JD's throat. It's like, oh, I guess it is happening.
Yeah. No, but you're right though. We've had, especially recently, so many great writers come on and join the team. But even in the last few years, we've had some great writers come on. Obviously, Ryan and Jay came on as writers first, and then came on as co-hosts of Extra Film, and man, that's been glorious to my life. And just the time and the freedom that it's given me. And then obviously, like, just all the the guests that we've had on the show, that's been very exciting. We've had a lot of first-time guests, especially last year. With the pandemic and everything, 2020 has been a little bit different on that front, just because we don't really know what we were doing from week to week. Even now, we still don't know what we're doing from week to week. We're trying to figure that out. So it's hard to schedule guests when you're operating in that way. But last year in 2018, we were able to bring on a lot of new people onto the show, which was always good as well. And I just feel like the conversations have been really rewarding and satisfying, at least for me. Even if I go long sometimes, and I'm the first to admit that I can be long-winded for sure, but
it's passion. I mean, and passion
it
fuels
is.
that.
Exactly. I mean, it's fostered some really great conversation that, at least to me, hopefully listeners listening or anyone watching on YouTube, if you've been with us and hopefully you've enjoyed the conversations, but at least for me, it's been really rewarding. Are there any shows that stand out to you, Brendan, as far as what we've done in the last 100 or so?
As far as the last 100, I feel like I'm a bit biased because JD, I weirdly feel like some of our best episodes, similar to Jay and Ryan over here, have been recently when we've gone back and looked at movies that aren't new releases that we already know that we're passionate about. For instance, I know we're going to be talking about movie franchises, so I'm not trying to play my trump card too early by saying this, but I think one of our best reviews this year, JD, was For Russia with Love, as we did in conjunction with the James Bond series that Ryan and Jake. No, seriously, thank you for not doing that review.
That was a great episode.
That was a great episode.
But I really enjoyed what we had to say about that. And even lately, when Ryan and I got together to talk about The Godfather, that was a great review. We followed that with the Godfather trilogy when you came back, JD, and Jay and I got together to do.
I loved our Heat conversation. That was a good one.
Heat conversation's up there. That I was just gonna say when you joined us for that. That was gonna be, I think, probably the next one I say is one for the books. Honestly.
I mean,
go ahead, Ryan.
I would be remiss if I didn't at least bring up Madeline's Madeline on this show. I mean,
that's a legend. I mean, that's a legend.
Was it a good review? It was entertaining.
To me, I always. Brent, here's the reason why is because, and I will say this every single day, I was sort of just kind of there. I mean, I was the coach, but it was very much.
You were the middleman in that.
I was like sitting back. I was like, I'm gonna go get a glass of water, maybe pop some popcorn and stuff, and see this fight. Because it was. And what's so crazy is that
we weren't on video that day. Ryan very well may have left for 15 minutes.
And what's crazy is that we both, I think we all love Shirley this year, but so when we talked about that film, it just this year it brought back the memories of that wonderful night.
That was an epic conversation. That's an all-timer.
And you guys just had to reference that review once again when you reviewed Shirley earlier this year.
Well, you got it. I mean, that was relatively early as well for me. And that was definitely one of the first times that I had done a review with JD. And I think JD realized at that point that he's not going to hold back, right?
Yeah, well, let's started the whole feud between the two of them.
Positively or negatively, I can get fairly passionate on this.
Let's think about that too, because I think that's actually another fun conversation, because it's great when we all agree and we actually have some great conversations when we're all equally passionate about something. But when we disagree, it makes for a very different type of banter. So that one being a great example with Madeline's Madeline. But how about Dark Phoenix?
Oh, for God.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
that was another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the other JJD butting heads.
A
But look,
film
I mean,
still have not seen yet.
you have no need to.
It's okay.
As for
I could be the tiebreaker. It's a horrible movie. And
well, again, this is our first live
HBO
stream.
Max.
Ryan and I have had combative conversations where literally we just have to say, "Let over." This is unlistenable. We have been yelling at each other for 20 minutes. We cannot. We have to restart.
Yeah, we had to
It's
restart.
unreleasable audio. Yeah, it was
we've
terrible.
done that.
Bad education. One like that for us this year.
Oh
Where it
my
was just
God.
like, let's start over. We were just arguing about one stupid thing for 15, 20 minutes straight. And we were just like, let's hit the refresh button and go back to this point and try and give something that people will want to listen to.
I got another one because I remember this. I mean, this is all happens just because I'm waiting because I didn't see the film and I hadn't seen it. So I'm waiting because I'd done the intro with Jay and I'm like, okay, I'll be back because it's a little behind the scenes. You know, sometimes when we have to split reviews, the other person just waits or they come back while the other are reviewing it. And I remember last year with Waves, just JD.
Oh,
and Jay
yeah.
going
That was one.
toe to toe, fist to cuff. And I walked in and I just put my earbuds to my ears and I went, nope, they're still yelling. Okay, I'll be back. And I just went to the other room. I was like talking with my wife. I was playing with the dog. I was like,
Does anyone else notice a trend here?
I've noticed
That
it.
Yep.
JD.
Well, no, but I mean,
And the rivalry was born.
I don't think, but then also last year too. I mean, there was the episode of what's that awful movie that had a good Ethan Hawke performance that was the Western. What was that?
You mean the good film, The Kid?
Oh God, The Kid. Good Lord, what a bad movie.
Good
And so JD and I went to toe to toe with that one. I Brendan and I have yet to argue about a lot of things. I
We
mean,
slightly disagreed before.
slightly disagree, but nothing like huge. To the
Yeah,
point of,
well, I don't think I've ever massively disagreed with anyone on an episode before yet.
Oh.
I mean, we've disagreed off air and talked about some of those things too, but I can't recall any time.
We might tonight.
We might tonight. I mean, JD, going back to some of our main shows, I think the closest I can remember is a movie that, you and I weirdly yell at each other on movies we both still really like. Because we find some aspect of it that we don't agree with. Like, for instance, the revenge movie, Revenge. We got into a massive argument on one small component of that
On
movie.
one
That really,
little component.
yeah. But we both were positive on the movie.
Yeah, it's like little things and like Avengers Endgame, which I was higher on. It's not like you disliked the movie; you liked it overall, but there were
not even
parts of
Endgame.
where
I think
we-
you mean Infinity War, which I was.
Infinity War. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. I feel like the worst, at least off the cuff here, I feel like the worst Brendan and I have gotten into it was on Lady Macbeth. I feel like that was maybe the most heated our arguments got, but
even then, that's a movie that sort of warrants that type of discussion and that type of dichotomy. You know what I mean? So in some ways, it was like, I understand why you feel that way. I didn't have that experience, but we were a little polite on that disagreement.
Yeah. But it was a little heated, or it certainly went back and forth.
Yeah, it did.
Weirdly, one of the most contentious arguments we've had, and maybe that's the wrong word, maybe it was just more playful than anything, but our review, and again, this is a weird title, but our review of London Has Fallen we got pretty heated. And I don't know why. I think it was more so the whole argument was, I think the first film is worse than this bad movie, and therefore I hate that one more, and you felt so the opposite. And that was the basis of the whole debate.
If I were to go through every single movie that has ever been reviewed on the InSession Film podcast, extra film, main show, bonus content, whatever, London Has Fallen, I think, is the worst movie we've ever covered.
I certainly do disagree with that, but I see the point though. Because for me, I think it is the first film came out in 2013, and it was like episode 7. It was like really
before
early
my
on.
time.
But I would still argue that might be the worst film I've seen that we've discussed in the show.
The fact that it's one of the has fallens, I think, is no coincidence.
And there goes Tim Costa. He's no longer listening.
Yeah.
We upset his Gerard Butler.
I know. All right. Well, we do have a movie draft we need to get to. So I guess before we do, does anyone have any final thoughts on the last 100 episodes?
I mean,
anything you want to add here?
I mean, within 100 episodes, I will say that, like I said, we've had all these amazing people come into our doors and on the website and on the podcast and everything. But this 4 unit of dudes here has stayed great friends, and we've argued about dumb things and text threads off air, and we've laughed about a ton of other dumb things off air, and we've consistently put in so much hard work. And besides Brendan, we all have 3 amazing wives that JD, Jay, and myself that allow us.
And that's not to say that Brendan's wife isn't amazing.
Yeah,
it's just that he doesn't
know
have
her yet.
I haven't met her yet.
I'm
sure she'll be fine.
Yeah, they're all extraordinary people, family and friends included, that put up with all of us, talking about movies or whatnot. And I mean, I just have to really say, within this 100 episodes still or whatnot, and even beyond, just thank you to JD and to Brendan for having me on, and now
thank you for being awesome. You made it so easy, man.
Giving me more responsibilities now that sometimes I'm like, why did I get these responsibilities? But
yeah, and thank you for giving me no more responsibility.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. But no, I mean, I got the best co-host in the world out of all this. A co-host I could never imagine never having in my life. I love him. Look at all those posters. He's texting me and stuff like that all the time. It's ridiculous, folks. I mean, we're talking about Criterions all the time, and now we get to talk about David Byrne this week and all this other fun stuff. I mean,
lucky you.
Adventures and Altman, and get to do all these things that I never thought I would be able to do, and it's all
movies,
thanks to InSession Film and movies.
Movies for sure. The only other review that I just wanted to bring up that I remember was the Climax review, when you were talking about the worst movies you've ever reviewed.
What a horrible movie!
A movie that I find morally reprehensible.
We will never.
That was another passionate review.
Okay, why did you guys not bring me on for that discussion? We could have totally have made up for Madeline's Madeline. I would have 1,000% agreed with you guys, and we would have.
That was a long enough review all by itself.
Yeah. We were angry enough. We didn't need to bring anybody else on.
Oh.
They were thinking about your sanity, JD. Yeah. They didn't want to hurt you.
I guess so. That's fair. That's fair. But yeah, we would have totally agreed on the discussion. So
yeah,
I guess I want to jump in here real fast to bounce off of what Ryan was saying, though, in the sense that, and it's appropriate that we're recording this, at least for this point anyway. We're recording this on October 18th, which is my wife's birthday. So happy birthday, Brandy. You're probably not watching, and that's okay. I very much understand.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Brandy.
Happy birthday, Brandy.
It does appropriately tie to what Ryan was saying, though, because I can only do this because of her grace and her flexibility and her allowing for us to do this. I'm recording this on her birthday, and I'm not getting in the doghouse or anything. Like, this is, pre-discussed, but it speaks to her, just her personality. It speaks to, our relationship and how much she cares about me. And she knows that I care about this. And she's just the best. This does not happen without Brandy. I mean, I joke often with these guys that, whenever we come up with an idea or we got to do something, I have to ask the boss first. Yeah. And referring to her, and somewhat sarcastic, but not really. I mean, she does kind of run the show behind the scenes in a lot of ways, because the moment she says no is the moment that I can no longer do anything.
Mhm.
And so, my gratitude for her in that is I really have no words to articulate it. It's amazing. So, a happy birthday for one to my lovely wife. But yeah, I mean, without her, I mean, this show it's over. It
is.
That
Well,
goes a long way.
there's also more to the story there too, because it's not just your wife's birthday. And once again, happy birthday, Brandy. But you're also celebrating another family birthday around the same time too. So
Yeah.
you've got two birthdays going on this weekend.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it was Sam's birthday yesterday, so they have birthdays back to back. So,
So adorable.
usually we would be at Disney World this weekend because of everything going on. Obviously, that did not happen this year.
You don't want to go, JD? You sure? I heard the governor's
So
very
when,
sure.
when Sam was born, Brandy got the greatest birthday gift of all: no longer being pregnant.
Yes,
That's one way to think of it, Jake.
I guess that's one way to look at it. But yeah, I mean, yeah. So it's a crazy time in this weekend. The fact that she's allowing us to do this, and we're recording earlier than we normally would on a normal weekend, and she's just her grace, her flexibility holds no bounds, and it's remarkable. So
Yeah, you're a lucky man.
very much so, 100%. All right. Is that it? Any other final thoughts, Brendan? Anything?
I think I'm good. I think we've
good?
said our piece when it comes to this
Okay.
segment of the show. Just once again, thanks to everyone that has
Oh, yeah.
given us the platform to keep doing this for 400 episodes.
and
if
our
you-
listeners. We cannot forget them
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
Like anyone
Yeah.
who listens to the show or is now watching this video, I mean, our gratitude is you really do mean the world to us. I mean, I say that every week on the
Mhm.
show, and I do mean that from the bottom of my heart. I mean, anyone that listens to
Yeah.
the show and allows for us to do this from week to week, it really means a lot to me. So with that, before we move on to the draft, a quick plug here. We do need to talk about our good friends over at First Time Watchers, as they do support our show. And Brendan, we didn't get to review anything this week as we are celebrating 400 episodes of InSession film. But like we are doing here, First Time Watchers, also a show worth celebrating.
Oh, they absolutely are. And if you're celebrating with us, that means you've hopefully gotten a chance to celebrate with the First Time Watchers, because, we network with them all the time. They network with us. We like to think we're part of the same club, which means you've at least heard of them. But as JD said, great supporter of our show, hosted by Tim, Walter, and Hermano. We may have lost Tim just a few moments ago when we gave some shade over to his beloved Has Fallen trilogy. But aside from that, they certainly know their movies.
They do know their movies. On their latest episode, they talked about Deerskin, which I have not seen. So
What is that?
admittedly, I don't know. It's a new movie out
HBO
this
Max
year.
movie.
Yeah, I just
Sure.
I haven't had a chance to see it yet. So admittedly, I haven't listened to that episode yet, but like all of their reviews, I can imagine it was a really fun listen, and I look forward to checking it out once I see Deerskin.
But that's what's unique about their show, JD, is they pick out a movie like that, and your first response is, what is that? It's just something like that.
Yeah.
But it's the gimmick of the show. It's something that they've never seen before. And it gives it a real fresh perspective when they give that great discussion over there. But they'll also discuss other movies that they've caught up with, whether they're new, old, on their list of shame, maybe some movie trailers that are worth noting too. So, yeah, we highly recommend it.
Yeah, they give out some great recommendations at the end of the show. Definitely go and check it out. Overall, it's a smart show. It's delicious. It's tantalizing, and one you need to check out. So, Brendan, where can you find these guys on the internet?
You just described Tim's thoughts on Gerard Butler right there, and he's loving every second of it. You can find these guys at firsttimewatchers.podbean.com. You can also hit them up on Twitter at First Time Watchers and on Facebook by simply searching First Time Watchers.
And go subscribe to them on iTunes. While you are there, please leave them a review. Let them know how much you love and adore their show. At the end of your review, we ask you leave a little hashtag there so they know we sent you to them. And this week, let's go with the hashtag. What do you think, Brendan?
Celebratory FTW, celebratory Tim, celebratory
Tim,
Hermano,
hashtag remove Tim. How about we?
Oh my gosh, he's gonna hate that.
That's what he would say to me if he was doing that. Our show.
Yeah.
Either way, leave him something fun and playful. Go check him out again. That's First Time Watchers. Also, want to say a brief thank you also to the Lamb Podcasting Network and to Geekcast Radio, as they have been remarkable partners to us since the very beginning of InSession Film. I mean, they've been with us since early 2013 and really helped us as we were coming into our own, trying to find a voice and a space within the film podcasting community, within the film social media community. They really welcomed us with open arms and helped launch our show in some big ways. And along the same token, it was maybe a year later, but Jump Cut Online over in the UK is another big partner of ours, and I wanted to shout them out as they've been just remarkable in helping us along the way.
Yeah,
as well as other shows like Feel and Film and of course Next Best Picture. They've been great, and so many other great shows. So very, very thankful to all of you for helping us out and making the show what it is today.
Yeah, we really do appreciate all of that support as well. And go check out all of those other platforms for all of you listening or watching. We highly recommend all of their work. It is time, gentlemen. We have gathered here together not just to celebrate 400 episodes, but for everyone here listening and watching, hopefully. I think everyone's more interested to see what we come up with for our franchise movie drafts.
This is going to be 40 minutes is over, so now we have to produce some real content here.
Yeah, so rather no longer talking about ourselves anymore. Before we get into the draft order and the actual draft itself, a few criteria just up front here, because we've gone back and forth quite a bit as far as our text chains and whatever, as far as what should qualify as a quote-unquote franchise. And there's been a lot of debate. There's probably still going to be some debate as we continue this conversation. It's not all set in stone. And feel free to jump in, guys, as far as how we want to define this. But the general idea is, if it all resolves in or involves itself in the exact same universe, same story, same set of characters, we're basically counting it as a singular pick, even if that trilogy maybe has a subsequent trilogy, maybe a prequel trilogy, for instance, without naming any specifics. If it's all part of the same story, it's one inclusion of a franchise. And that's basically what we're working on here. Yeah.
So, for example, all of the MCU, that's going to be one pick.
That's one franchise.
Where there's distinction is something like the Spider-Man films, right? Like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films are its own thing. When you compare it to something
for now.
For now, where Andrew Garfield's films are their own thing. That is separate from the MCU. Or you look at Nolan's Batman films compared to the 90s. Those are very clearly defined different stories. So we are separating them out. So that's more or less kind of where we're at in terms of criteria.
Yep. That is the plan there. Ryan and Jay, any thoughts on that before we get into our actual competition?
My only thought is that I know, despite all of the conversations we've had, there are going to be several arguments over the qualifications of various franchises.
I feel like we kind of did that deliberately, because having a discussion like that where we argue just a little bit, that might be pretty fun.
It could be.
Yep, exactly. No, that's very true.
Or it could just be us arguing the whole time. We'll see.
Maybe. We'll see.
I'm just excited to see it happen and watch this podcast burn. I'm just waiting for it.
Here we go.
Bring it on.
And speaking of letting this podcast burn, I think Ryan's got first dibs to let this podcast burn. I first want to toss it over to you, Ryan, because you're the one that created the draft order here. So why don't you reveal it to us?
Well, the draft order tonight, which was done on a randomizer.
It was random, yes.
It was random. I sent the video. Whether or not these three gentlemen watch the video is up to them. It's 30 seconds. We can watch 4 hours.
Yeah, we can watch
I knew Jay would not. I knew Jay would not, because he literally asked us before the show, "What's the draft order?" But the draft order tonight is yours truly at the number 1 position, followed by Mr. Brendan Cassidy at number 2, followed by Jay Ledbetter at 3, and rounding us out is, of course, our leader, Mr. JD Durant. And we will be doing the snake draft style. We will be also doing 10 glorious rounds.
Yes.
Over the topic of, like Brendan said, film franchises, movie franchises, whatever we think those are, discussions abound, all that fun stuff. Yeah, I'm just and it was kind of my idea to do this. We thought about a bunch of other topics as well. We talked about, movies within our era. We talked about trilogies, though we were going to go down an even darker rabbit hole probably with that.
Yeah.
We just kind of decided on movie franchises because it feels like something of a broad topic. Obviously, we did our director draft a while back and we got a lot of great feedback on that, but to do a film franchise, it's something for me and Jay to talk about a little bit more here tonight, because of the fact that we are an extra film. We don't talk about a lot of film franchises, and there are some that Jay and I do like, and there are some, of course, that we probably don't and that we won't pick, but we're all here to pick some things that we define, and this is a callback to our texters, as fun, because we like to see fun on the big screen, right, JD?
Yeah, exactly.
We appreciate.
I don't know why that was pointedly directed at JD.
No reason at all why I went to JD over there at all. Just pointing out that we like to have fun and we like to go to the movies for fun. Just pointing that out.
We like to have fun.
There's a lot of art.
We like to have fun.
All forms of entertainment we can love and appreciate for their own reasons. And honestly, what's fun about franchises is that some franchises actually satisfy that entertainment itch in different ways. Some are a bit more artful. We may talk about some of them. Some are going for that sense of fun that we also may talk about. And that's what makes it very exciting, honestly, especially when we get to the tail end of this, where we're going to maybe find ourselves like scouring for something. And that's what's going to be fun with 10 picks each. And I cannot wait to see that competition unfold. And I think our listeners are as well, which means we should get started. Ryan, you're first in line. Why don't you pick our first franchise, and we're going to go from there.
God, this was so tough. I think it was a little bit easier to do the director first pick than it was to do this, in all honesty, because there's so many great franchises that I like. And in that draft, just a callback, the number 1 overall pick was Martin Scorsese, picked by yours truly. And so I sat here and I just thought about it, and I just thought about the franchise that I love so much and that I've loved since I was a kid. And I think so many people love it for so many reasons, whether they want to argue about it or not on Twitter. And I'm going to pick Star Wars.
Star Wars.
Look, it's the one that started all of this. And look, I understand why people get so upset or they get in their corners about The Last Jedi or The Rise of Skywalker or the new trilogy, the prequels, whatever they may be, the spinoff films. It's because deep down inside, we all just love Star Wars. Like, that's really what it's rooted in, whether or not it's also rooted in a lot of other things that I will not talk about.
Yeah.
It's all based around the fact that Lucas back in 1977 created and started a franchise that we would never think could ever get to the point in which it's at. It's given us so many wonderful characters, so many memorable moments, so many films that I love. Even the worst films in the franchise, and that's including the most recent one, I find some way or another to defend them because of the fact that when I see those stars up on the screen and the text start rolling and John Williams score.
Ryan, you do not backtrack on Rise of Skywalker. You liked it. I'm tired of this.
I'm saying
You're
that right now.
with the grain at this point. You liked it flat out.
I do.
Really
I do like it. And it's because, you want to know why? Because it's Star Wars. At the end of the day, it's Star Wars. And I love it. I love Star Wars. Star Wars is great. I can have a million Star Wars movies every single year, and I would be okay with that. Because I love the franchise.
This is where this franchise draft is going to be fun, because you can technically argue that Star Wars, of the 9 films, even the 11, if you want to include, the spinoff films that they did too, it can be
Half
a very
of them are bad.
Well, that's the thing. It's a very top-heavy franchise, but the name brand of the franchise is so powerful. Is that going to matter? And that's when it becomes a little bit tricky when picking some of these franchises going forward. But I think it's still a good pick because the name brand itself. I mean, there's an amusement park after it now. I mean, it exists.
I'm not just picking it because of the name brand. I generally just love Star Wars, and I don't.
But people just love the world, regardless of it being a good movie or not within that franchise. People love. The lore is going to carry it.
I mean, good. I mean, movies, indeed.
Movies, well, especially in mythology and lore. And I guess that's
a perfectly fine first pick.
Here we go.
It's a pretty powerful first pick, and I think a lot of people are going to gravitate towards it. I'm for my first pick though, going from that. This was, again, like you said, Ryan, this is really difficult because you want to go with the one that has that name brand recognition that's going to carry the weight in and of itself, regardless of the quality of films or the quantity of films. I think I'm going to go a little bit differently as far as that strategy. I'm going to veer at something that I think is representative of everyone here on this show right now, all of our writers, as well as all of our listeners who do cover various age demographics too, because we all grew up with Andy and his toys.
Son of a
So it might seem like a bit of a out of the left box kind of pick to do this so early, but for only 4 films, the Toy Story franchise, I think, remains one of the most consistent and one of the most beloved because so many people just simply grew up with it. I personally still don't love Toy Story 4, but a lot of people still do. And I'm looking at that. Ryan, I know you do. Yeah. But even if you just take out the trilogy in a vacuum, it's one of the best movie trilogies of all time, regardless of genre or what it's comparatively to. So for those reasons, just because of the relatability of it, I need to take it early. I really do.
No, I think it's a good pick.
It's a great pick. Yeah, I mean, I'm so shocked you picked it this early, and I was hoping it'd be there later in rounds, but I love it. I mean,
honestly, seeing your reaction after I picked it was priceless. that made it worth it.
So mad because I had it down on my list. I'm like, okay, I can get this maybe second, third round, and then you just dropped. No, but you're right, and the reason why I also want to clarify this before we continue, and the reason why Brendan, you keep mentioning name brand is. Like the last draft, and we forgot to mention this earlier, we will be putting up the results of this draft up online for everyone to vote to see who is the winner. Our last winner was, of course, Jay, and everybody decided with Jay's picks in the draft for Best Director. So we will be putting that up
for sure.
We will be putting that up during this week after the episode drops. That's why it seems like strategy, but it's also we are talking about the movies that we do cherish and love in those franchises that are within them.
Right.
Well, that's what I like so much about this is it reveals a lot about us as movie goers. I think that's, we discover things about each other that we didn't know before when we do these drafts. Like with the director draft, especially, I thought we did a lot of that. So,
that was one thing
my
you
pick
did,
now.
Jay. Well, Jay, something that you did during that director draft before I cut you off was that you kind of analyzed each of our own psychologies with that one. Like, you sent us a text chain thinking like Brenda's the humane one, Ryan's the blank one, and just based on which directors we picked. That was fun.
Jay's the cynical one, believe it or
Jay
not.
Is hashtag Mr. Cynical.
Shocking. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Well, okay. So number 3 pick. I've got 2 that I'm weighing very heavily here. This is tough, but I think I'm going to have to go with the trilogy that really launched me into movie fandom. Like the movie that started me off into the direction of loving movies was Raiders of the Lost Ark. So we're going to get the second Lucasfilm franchise here in the first 3 picks, and I am going to take Indiana Jones. Look, the original trilogy, I think all of those movies are genuinely great, and they're all very tonally different. Raiders is kind of like a classic adventure film, that kind of 30s action movie. The second one is like one of the greatest divorce films of all time, with like George Lucas going through a horrible divorce
and
just writing this incredibly dark movie.
Rating.
Yeah, that and Gremlins basically invented PG-13. And that movie is awesome. I think people need to go back and revisit that one. And then Last Crusade, it was kind of like a course correction from that, where it was kind of the most fun of all of them and kind of the silliest, and has some kind of like Buster Keaton-y, Charlie Chaplin energy to it. So those are really good. And Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, while far from perfect, I think has a lot of value. You know, I think the highs of that movie are pretty high. The lows of that movie are extremely low. But overall, I think that makes it kind of a middle of the road blockbuster.
It's, you know, what's weird is that I feel like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull has been slowly getting reevaluated as years have gone on.
A little
that
bit,
it's
yeah.
Well, not that it's being reevaluated as something entirely positive, just that it's certainly the worst Indiana Jones film, but it might not be as bad as its reputation suggests.
Right. Yeah, I think that's definitely true.
Yeah.
I actually like Kingdom in the Crystal Skull because I've rewatched it recently, and it was on TV, and I was just like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And I rewatched it, and I actually really enjoyed it. And I think outside of the vacuum of expectations of the time and everything, it's actually really good. I know they're gonna do the new one soon, whenever the heck we're gonna get that with James Mangold. I'm just gonna say this: like, I want Shia back. I don't care. Like, it was like I want,
especially with who he is now.
Yeah,
like bring Shia back now.
Yeah, the great actor he is now. Hell yeah, like bring him back. And actually,
what kind of tattoos can they get him to get all over his body for this movie? You know, like if he was willing to get a full body tattoo for the tax collector, who knows what he'll do for Indiana Jones at this point?
Yeah. He'll put mud right on his head. You know what I mean? But no, this is a non-surprising pick for Jay. I know how much he loves Indiana Jones.
Yeah,
he and I share the passion of this.
About 8 feet that way, I have an Indiana Jones poster, but I decided to go with this wall today.
Yes, and great pick, Jay.
Yeah, love that pick as well. Some really great picks all around. Before I get to my first one, though, I want to read. I kind of chuckled. I just saw the comment, but Brian Suspielis, our own, who writes gloriously for the website, he wrote, "I've met Brandy and Sam, and JD only refers to her as the boss." That was his and it's so true, because every time he texts me about like wanting to meet up when he's down here in Miami, I always say, okay, yeah, let me ask the boss. And if she says yes, I'll be there.
It's crazy that you asked Bruce Springsteen to go out and meet Brian. But that's, that's you, man.
If she's lumped in the same sentence as that man, I think that's a compliment.
Yeah, no, she is the boss.
Yeah.
All right, so getting to my first pick here, this is a franchise that is also top heavy, at least how I feel about Star Wars. But
I know where he's going with this.
That first trilogy is so great. I'm going with The Lord of the Rings here for my first pick in round one. And I like the first Hobbit okay. I don't think it's completely horrible. The latter two films, not good.
I would say the first Hobbit is actually a decent movie. I'd say it's easily my favorite of those three Hobbit films.
Yeah, same. Absolutely. But those first three Lord of the Rings films are so grand, and the epic scale of them is wonderful. The characterization, the music, I mean, the costuming, the production design, all of it is so wonderful. In fact, as we move into 2003 for our next retrospective, we're going to finally get to talk about one of them. And most likely we'll do a movie series on that trilogy next year sometime. And I look forward to getting into that big time. I haven't seen the films in a few years, but each time I watch them, it just reinvigorates my love for that world and those three films. And for me, it's right up there as far as the best trilogies I've ever seen. I love them.
It's barely even a trilogy because everything is just so singular with them. And that's not. I'm not trying to argue against you. It's just a great. It's basically one movie in three parts. It's like a 10 or maybe 12 or 13 hour movie, depending on which versions you watch. But the fact that it's so singular is what makes it arguably the most consistent trilogy of all time. Maybe debatable if you want to call it the greatest trilogy, but the most consistent, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, really, when you look at the financial risk that they took with that movie, truly one of the craziest things that Hollywood has ever done, financing these three huge movies all at one time.
At the same time.
Just going
like crazy.
Yeah. And they filmed all of them back to back, which is part of why they do feel so of a piece. And I'll be honest, it's a franchise I don't personally love as of now. I'm going to revisit them sometime in the future. I made the plan to do that at the beginning of the year. Now that they've come out with these 4Ks that are be coming out in December, that might be the
Yeah.
time for me to revisit. So,
I want those
but
4K
it's
bad.
certainly a great pick, and I know a lot of people love that franchise.
Well, you're right with that it being such a gamble, because look at Peter Jackson's history as a filmmaker before Lord of the Rings. Really, the only thing that might be comparable is something like Heavenly Creatures or something like that. But before that, what was there? Dead Alive, The Frighteners.
Yeah, he was kind of like a schlock guy.
Yeah,
certainly did nothing like that.
he was a poor man Sam Raimi, basically.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, JD, it's a great pick. I mean, I even have somewhat of a soft spot for the Hobbit films because I saw them with a lot of my college friends, and we watched Lord of the Rings, the extended editions, constantly because they were like one of the only movies we could actually all agree on to watch at times. Yeah. And I mean, when they re-released them in the theaters, the extended editions, me and my wife, we went and saw them, you know, they did one every week, and we made that a sort of event or a date night. I mean, it is a great franchise, even to the point where we went and saw Return of the King, and the sort of all the different people that were in the theater, we were literally sitting next to a bunch of nuns watching Lord of the Rings, the Return of the King, like
That's
literal
incredible.
nuns in their outfits and the whole get up. And we were like, and they were happy and excited, and they were like getting cheering, like when the big battle sequences were happening. It was one of the coolest, sort of theater experiences I've ever had. I've also done the marathon at Alamo Drafthouse of the entire extended edition trilogy of Lord of the Rings, one whole day. I would not recommend it unless you have a place with good food like they do, a lot of alcohol. But no, it's a wonderful pick.
Speaking of alcohol, I may get up and get another drink at some point. So if I step away from this live stream, just FYI.
There you go. Yeah, I love those.
Total pros across the board.
total pros. But yeah, I absolutely love those films. The storytelling, the characterization, the emotion, and because it does kind of work as one long story, like you're saying, Brendan, there's an exhaustive nature to it that I love. Like when you get to the end and Frodo is there and he's just at his wit's end, like you really feel that. It's so palpable.
It's that feeling that you get watching like a full-blown miniseries or a full-blown show, and you get to its series finale. It's just, it's so ever-encompassing.
So all right, so moving into round 2, obviously as we sneak here, that means I get the first pick in round 2. And up until about a month ago, I'm not sure if this film would be my next pick here, and maybe I'm sabotaging myself, as I could maybe get this in later rounds. I don't know, but at this point, I also don't care. My first pick in round 2 is Harry Potter.
I knew you were going with that because you're in the middle of
going to
rewatching.
take it next. You
Love.
I thought he was going another
movies.
way.
No. Obviously, if you follow me on social media and on Letterboxd, I just revisited all of these films, and I can barely describe the experience. I tried to on Letterboxd, at least in some ways, but emotionally speaking, it's almost hard to describe. I love the growth of those films, the maturity as they go, the emotion that those films incorporate. It is so good. And on this revisit, I was able to pick up on so many little nuances, the way those films tether little threads together that you may not realize on a first watch, but on rewatches, those little threads, I think, go a long, long way in stitching something so seamless. And there's a lot of storytelling, but in 8 films, man, it does a lot. And the emotion, I just think, is so well earned. The music, the production design, it all and the performances. I mean, some truly, genuinely great performances in these films.
Those movies are way more sophisticated than they get credit for.
Yes. And in particular, I know we all love Alan. I know we all love Alan Rickman and what he does in terms of playing the character that he does. In hindsight, knowing the reveals at the very end, it is incredible. It's almost how I described Amy Adams, her performance in Arrival.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It's very much that same way, where when you know who the character is and what he's doing, he's giving two performances at once, and it's so breathtaking in hindsight, knowing who Snape is, the mystery of him, and what he's truly up to. You do kind of realize that it's
what he's
not
holding back on. Yeah,
exactly, and it is
it
breathtaking.
completely recontextualizes that whole performance in that final film, and I can understand why Warner Brothers was trying to campaign for him to get a Best Supporting Actor nomination, and he's up there as far as any acting performance in that franchise that should have been considered for such glory. I think he and honestly Tom Felton in the 6th movie, Half-Blood Prince, I think is phenomenal in that one. It's weird to see a franchise like that is so fantasy, so highbrow like that, really take itself so seriously and succeed in doing so. And that whole like gap of seeing these people grow up, I mean, it basically gives off the sense of Richard Linklater's Boyhood in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I love how all of that really works. I mean, and even Radcliffe himself, I think, gives some really good performances. I know Brendan and I can't remember if we mentioned this last week or if we were just talking offline, but in Azkaban, that's like The Prisoner of Azkaban is the first film in the franchise where it starts to move away from feeling, more childish as the first films do. And there's a couple of scenes in that film when he's reflecting on his parents where Daniel Radcliffe really hones into that well, and he builds it up in such a way that when he's yelling out those charms at the end to save himself in Sirius Black, I mean, it's oddly stirring. Like, it was more moving to me emotionally than I kind of anticipated.
Expecto Patronum.
Exactly. My God. And it gives me chills when he yells that out at the end. It is absolutely wonderful. So
it's great stuff.
Yeah.
You do have 2 films to add to that pick, though, which are
so I guess those technically exist.
Yeah. Just
I'm the only person in the world who likes both of them. I don't love them, but I actually like both of them.
Okay. Now I will admit I do kind of like the first one. I don't hate it.
The first one's good.
I'm mixed on it.
Yeah, the first one's good, and then the second one has an ending that I literally yelled at the television, and I think I texted all of you, "What the hell was that? Like, come on!" I was so angry, and Jay's like, "What a movie!" What a movie.
Well, to be fair, I don't think you love that movie, but you at least appreciate being back in the world.
I'm kind of a sucker for it, which is why I'm extremely frustrated that JD got a hold of it. Because if there was ever anything that I was in a fandom of, it would have been Harry Potter. I mean, that was
he's
it followed me like age for age, all of those books. So those are extremely important to me. I watch those very regularly. That got me into kind of the world of, I wouldn't call Harry Potter high fantasy, but the world of fantasy and all that kind of stuff. It's a great bridge into that world. And so, I mean, that the Harry Potter lore is extremely, the creator of Harry Potter, however problematic she may end up being, the fiction that she has created means a lot to me. So I'm very jealous of that.
I agree. And it kind of bridges what Ryan was kind of joking earlier when he kind of, threw an arrow at me, but I think what I love about Harry Potter is that it is extremely fun. The lore is fascinating, but the films, I haven't read the books. I've started the first one, so I can't speak to that. But the films themselves, I think, are so artistically crafted that, and because of all those little details I mentioned earlier, that after the rewatch, I immediately wrote down, this is at the very least a round 2 pick for me, if not the first round, depending on how I thought things were shaping up. And knowing that things were going to snake back around to me, this was easily I love the art of the Harry Potter, and it's genuinely really, really well crafted.
Well, like I said, they're sophisticated, and I think the last comment we can make before we keep going on with this draft, so we don't just spend time reviewing the Harry Potter franchise. Aside from the unfortunate passing of Richard Harris, who had to be replaced, can you think of another franchise this lengthy that just kept the entire cast throughout all of it? So it really just gave it such like a sense of consistency and progress and growth that I just think is unparalleled.
It's so good.
Good.
It's wonderful. And also the bankability of casting those young kids and them turning out to be good actors.
So that way
I mean,
Yeah.
Jay and I talk about all the time about kid actors and how they frustrate us and they can make or break movies. And that franchise, especially if that core 3 characters of Ratliff, Grint, and Watson are not good enough actors, then those movies are going to be
they fall apart.
Yeah,
time.
they will be awful.
Yeah.
So, no, it's a great pick, JD.
Okay. On to
Enough Harry Potter.
On to Jay.
Yeah.
Oh boy, this is tough.
I think we just lost a body.
So an hour and 10 minutes in, we finally ran into some tech issues.
It was bound to happen sometime, ladies and gentlemen.
Not too bad.
Not too bad. So let's give it a second, and it's right before his pick, so
okay,
we at least know where we stopped.
Well, until Jay comes back, let's talk more about Harry Potter.
Well, no,
there
never
he
mind.
is.
He's back.
Oh, did I? Okay. I lost you for a second. All right. Okay. The franchise, it's all live. It's the first time we're doing this. We're gonna have some technical difficulties.
Yes.
The franchise that I am going to go with is the Mad Max franchise. I'm gonna go with
Okay,
Nice.
I'm getting a beer.
Wow.
And we've lost Brennan. After just losing Jay, now Brennan's gone.
I am going to go with Mad Max, which is again another franchise that has 4 entries that feel so different. Although you could maybe you could maybe say that Fury Road is just like the really, really epic, awesome version of Mad Max 2. But certainly Mad Max, the original, is really small scale, stripped down. It was made for pennies. And it's all about world building and as well as just incredible practical stunts where people are getting seriously injured. And it's just a great world that he establishes, this post-apocalyptic wasteland that we are now so familiar with. And it gave us Mel Gibson, who again, personal problems aside, is one of the great movie star presences on screen. But between that first one and then Mad Max 2, which really ups the action and turns it into a very different kind of franchise, where it goes from a revenge franchise about Max to movies where Max is sort of a passive character. Everything around him is what the movie is about, which is what I love so much about that series. Beyond Thunderdome is a fun-ish movie, not my favorite. But then obviously it's not that bad, but it's the lesser of the franchise in my opinion.
Well, even so, like, sorry to cut you off. I know you're in the middle of your spiel, but we were talking a little bit about Indiana Jones, your last pick, in a movie like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I would still say Beyond Thunderdome is a much better movie comparatively than that. It doesn't make Mad Max all that top heavy.
No, not at all. And it has some great everything in the Thunderdome, I think, is very entertaining. The Bungie
first half of that movie is
fight
awesome.
sequences are pretty good. Yeah, and there's some great world building in that one. And then obviously Fury Road is the crown jewel of that franchise. It's just one of the greatest action films ever made. And that really is just George Miller at the peak of his powers, just knocking it out of the park with that movie. So I'm going Mad Max.
And as you can tell by me getting up and getting a beer, that was going to be my next pick. And it's so top of mind, too, because we just got the word of the movie Furiosa coming out. Not with Charlize Theron. Yes, but it's so top of mind because of how great Mad Max Fury Road was, which apparently did come together almost by accident, if I'm not mistaken, given how torturous that production was. Yeah. But needless to say, it's made one of the greatest action movies of the past decade. Came out in 2015. And if we're continuing the snake order, it's my turn next. I had 2 franchises in my mind of what I was going to go with next. It was going to be Mad Max, but I think it's only appropriate to go to my next pick, which did turn out another one of what people would say is one of the greatest action movies of the past decade. I'm going with the Mission Impossible franchise.
Son of a Good stuff. Good stuff. All right.
But
that's 3 straight snipes there. The person before them taking the one that the person was going to take next.
This is where it's going to get really fun. I'm so glad we're doing this live. I hope we have enough people watching this. I can't stop looking at Ryan right now. Anyway, I don't think it really warrants much explanation. I think if we're talking about franchises that have simply gotten better over time, the Mission Impossible franchise needs to be in that conversation. I still love that first film from 1996. And honestly,
I love that De Palma movie.
Yeah.
And the fact that this franchise has given such free reign to every director that has taken on each installment, I think is really a credit to that franchise in and of itself. As much as we like to bag on Mission Impossible 2, at least John Woo still came in and basically made a John Woo movie. And I really do respect it. And I grew up with
Not
Mission
the worst
Impossible.
movie in the franchise.
Don't get JD started, because I know you're going to say Mission Impossible 3.
Don't even.
But every one of those movies has something to offer. And like I said, they've arguably gotten better over time. I think that's what people would at least argue, at least most people. I tend to love the De Palma film, and I love what Christopher McQuarrie's been doing with it lately, as much as everyone else probably does too. And it's a franchise that takes risks, thanks to Tom Cruise, who refuses to act his age, and all the power to him for that.
Or his species.
Whatever species he is.
One of my favorite Letterboxd reviews for any one of them, I think, came from Matt Singer from Screen Crush, who said, and I forget which one of the installments it was, he said, I twisted my ankle on a run the other day, and Tom Cruise does all this stuff. I'm pretty sure he's an actual warlock, I think is what he basically said. And he's so right.
He flew on the outside of an airplane.
As the cold open of a movie. And it meant nothing to the movie.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Yeah, that's a great pick.
Yeah.
I have nothing to say to Brendan.
Ryan is so
I'm
mad.
sorry, man.
I'm so pissed. You have no idea. They know how much the Mission Impossible franchise means to me. It literally had me on one of my first appearances on the main show talking about Fallout, was actually in my top 10 in that year, unlike some people that just picked them. But nonetheless, I must move on, and I'm going to just. You can
make a trade. Trade that pick for a third and a fourth.
No,
we talked about Brendan and I not getting any arguments, and then he just had to pull the rug out from under all of that and completely undermine it. So I see how it goes, Brendan. But no, it's a good pick. I know. I mean, I'm waiting for those movies. I cannot wait for this pandemic to be over so I can see whatever the heck he's doing next. The man's literally going to kill himself for cinema, and I'm so for it. But it is
something before. Come on.
I mean, if he died making a Mission Impossible movie, and that was like, and then it just goes Finn on like the end of the movie, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. Yeah, it's how he like write a whole letter about like, this is actually how I really wanted to go. But look, if I can't pick Mission Impossible, which was totally going to be my next pick, then I'm going to pick a film franchise that is very recent of mine, because Jay and I started the year off talking about these films, and it started our movie franchise, and Jay knows that I was probably going to go for this if it was on the board, and that of course is James Bond 007. I have to go with this.
You're continuing with the franchises where half the movies are bad.
I mean, I could debate that about Indiana Jones.
Is that the strategy? No, you don't, because you think Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is good.
Yeah, well, that's true, but I also think that it's not the worst one. That's Temple of Doom.
Temple of
Doom rules.
Look, the lows of Bond are well documented based off of our movie series, and of course, all the wonderful comments on the main show from Brendan and JD. But those are all part of its mythos, and all part of the fact that every one of the people that I talk to or that I read that don't like the Roger Moores, people like Roger Moore. They like Pierce Brosnan. Some like Lazenby, some don't. Some people like Connery, some people despise Connery. Some people like Craig, some don't. Everyone sways differently, but what they do love is the character and the world and the ideas and the gadgets and the girls and the villains and all these things that make James Bond so special. I mean, one of the big movies this year that people are so mad and want to be released on VOD is No Time to Die. Like, that is literally, everyone's like, I want to see No Time to Die. I want to see No Time to Die. And regardless of how the last movie does, whether it's good or not, the next one is waited on anticipated breath, because when this franchise is at its height, it is an all-time franchise. It's one that has lasted probably longer than just about anyone that we will mention tonight. It's lasted even longer than Star Wars. And when this one comes out, when No Time to Die comes out, we will literally be having a discussion as to who we want to play James Bond for weeks, months, years, until they announce it. And that is the sort of great thing about this. It leaves us wanting more. The title card at the end of a Bond film is James Bond 007 will return, something Marvel stole many years ago when they started their franchise, because this is the start of movie franchises as a whole. It's very much inclined with Alfred Hitchcock in my pick in the movie draft, is that not all of Alfred Hitchcock's films were home runs, but the guy made a lot of great, fantastic classics, and there's a lot of those in the Bond franchise. I love it. It started the spy thriller, and yeah, I mean, what more can you say? You know,
Well,
it's the man in a tuxedo with a license to kill.
Like Star Wars, it has the mythology and the
I
iconography that I think is enough
I think
to
we
carry
all
it.
expected you to pick that one, Ryan.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah.
we know your love for it, and I think you make a really great point in the sense that James Bond has so much to offer in terms of variety, you know, because, you know, the Connery films are different from the Craig films and are different from the Moore films and so forth. And while there is similarities because it is one character in the same world, but there's the way they approach it each time is so different. And regardless of how the quality of the films may, you know, there may be a disparity there, but you know, it still has so much to offer. And that to me, I think what makes it fun and what was so interesting hearing you guys talk about it in that movie series is just getting into the nuances of all those disparities and nuances and, you know, what makes the franchise so varied. And that's why I love it as well. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, it's great stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then I didn't even mention like Bond songs and how those.
Yeah,
have been,
that
like,
too.
the zeitgeist
Talking about
of people.
iconography, James Bond, the franchise has so much iconography.
So we're
Its tentacles are everywhere, like Spectre. You know what I mean? There's tentacles and everything. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, it is round 3, and
You're next.
Look, I've gone with a couple of classics. You know, something that we are all very familiar with. It's time for me to take some recent stuff, and look, it's on the board, and it's probably, along with Mission Impossible, the best franchise going on right now. You can book me on that because I firmly believe it. And I didn't even see the first entry in theaters, which tells you how much I've grown to love and appreciate this franchise. I'm taking John Wick off the board. I'm taking John Wick off the board.
Oh,
Taking it off the board. I love John Wick. I love these movies, and I knew it would hurt all of you, just like you.
I like John Wick more than anyone here.
You actually do. That is true.
I love the world building. I think the world building within John Wick rivals any franchise going on right now. I think it has such a rich and deep mythology. Probably I've even said this and then people have gotten very mad at me, but I think that its mythology and its universe is just as compelling, if not more compelling, than something like the Marvel Cinematic Universe to me. I think you have a hero in John Wick who is damaged, who is also, with that damage, brings destruction. And that first film is an all-time classic. It's one of those where I saw that movie and I watched it on HBO Max because we all thought it was, like, based off the trailer, we all thought that franchise was a joke. Oh, that first one where it's
we basically all thought it was going to be another one of those, like, give Liam Neeson a gun type
exactly.
of movies. Yeah.
And then then I watched it one night and I really was so blown away with it that I told my wife, you got to see this movie. So we watched it the next night and we were there for the sequel, for Chapter 2, which is, I think, a great sequel. And then, yes, even as I wasn't a big fan of Chapter 3 at first, I have seen that movie probably more times during the quarantine than any other movie because of how insanely awesome it is. I mean, just the first 20-30 minutes of that movie where he is trying to survive in New York is exactly what you want based off the end of the second film. And it leaves you with a cliffhanger right now where I don't know where this franchise is going to go, but I cannot personally wait. It revitalized Keanu Reeves in the zeitgeist, which has been a wonderful gift to all of us. And And the man literally does love cinema. Well, we've seen the clips of how much he does love cinema and the craft he puts into it. It's kind of spawned this whole new franchise and the way we're doing action films nowadays. It's very influential. It's very good. John Wick, man, just good movies. Good movies.
And there's going to be more where that came from.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because there's going to be way more movies coming out yet. And I say way more. At least there's a fourth one that we know that has been working on for quite some time. So the franchise is going to continue.
They keep making more and more money. So
yeah, it's one of those where it keeps making more money as the franchise going on. I mean, keep making them because they're great.
Yeah.
Yeah, they rock.
Yeah. Well, that is a great pick, and it is one I did think about. And I'm actually surprised it went this early. We'll see how this kind of goes with this. But I think it's a very out of the box pick, and it certainly made Jay upset, and that was really fun to see.
I was thinking that was like a round 4 or 5er.
It probably was to most people, but I feel like we're going a little out of the box for a lot of these right now. And I think that means when it comes to my next pick now, as I'm next in line, I may have to change it up a little bit and make my picks a little bit more marketable. Because we, like you said, Ryan, as we kicked off this conversation, we are putting our lists out there for people to vote on. And many people would say one of the most iconic trilogies out there right now is the Dark Knight trilogy. So that's where I'm going with my next pick here.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And it's a trilogy I mostly love. I don't love the Dark Knight Rises personally, but I still do love those first two entries and how they sort of help continue the reshaping of superhero movies. And it is something I do appreciate about those movies. Batman Begins especially, I think, is probably my favorite of the three because it's such an artistic superhero movie that really focused on the character of Batman and was a great setup for what Christopher Nolan could do with The Dark Knight and really, I guess, as we talked about during our Heat review, kind of rip on Michael Mann a bit during much of that. And it is noticeable. But to see
if you're
that
going to rip somebody off, it might as well be one of the greatest directors of all time.
Yeah, which is fair. But to do that in the world of a superhero movie and to really get away with it, I think does deserve some credit. So I can understand why people do see a movie like The Dark Knight as what some people say is the best superhero movie of all time. And while I would pick a few other movies over top of that, I know so many people feel that way, and that's why I'm picking it here.
Yeah, I mean, it is the greatest superhero film of all time, Brendan. I had this really low on my list. I had it towards the bottom because I have gone back.
You're the one that likes The Dark Knight Rises, aren't you?
No, I rewatched that film recently, and
so now you're going back towards the consensus again.
No,
another one.
All right, Jake, calm down. But no, it's that I do think it is lesser, but I always forgive that film because I knew exactly the blueprint that Nolan was most likely going down. Obviously, with the Ledger death and everything, he had to change everything and sort of where he was going to go. But it's still not a terrible film. It's still it's a good film. It's just not up to the first two, which are really good films. I mean, people love The Dark Knight, but they also really do love Batman Begins, which is one of the best origin stories ever put to film of any character and any iteration of Batman. Obviously, it's the best one. So I mean, it's a good pick, and you can't go wrong with getting the Nolan fans on your side. So that is a good thing as well.
You're gonna get votes.
We didn't have that. We did not pick Nolan in our last draft, and I'm sure we would have
remedying that right now.
Yeah, so you're fixing that problem immediately.
Yeah, that's I mean, obviously it had to go. I'm kind of surprised it lasted. I'm shocked it got picked after John Wick for sure.
Yeah.
Sounds like
it's a great pick. I do love those first two Dark Knight films for sure. Dark Knight. I mean, the one thing you cannot deny about that trilogy, man, is it important in the history of cinema, for better or worse, perhaps.
Yeah.
But it is certainly an incredibly influential franchise. So a great pick there, Brendan. I guess I'm up now, and I'm kind of surprised this one has lasted as long as it has. This is going to tie into our David Fincher series that we have been doing recently. I'm going to take the Alien franchise. I mean, what a great crop of movies there are there, especially, obviously, Alien 1, I think, is a stone cold masterpiece, one of the greatest horror
Perfect movie.
sci-fi films
Regardless
ever
of
made.
genre, perfect movie.
Yeah, really a perfect movie. What a fantastic film.
Great movie.
Aliens, we discussed on the podcast. I'm a little lower on that than most. I like
Bad
it.
movie.
I definitely
I'm
think
way
it's good.
higher on it than you guys.
Yeah, I know. Most people are. A
like
lot of
it.
people
It's a
say
good
it's their
movie. It's a
favorite.
really good
I like
movie.
it. It's a good movie. And then the one where I kind of really go off the beaten path is I think Alien 3 is great. I think it's the second best movie in the franchise.
It's good.
It's so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's incredibly fascinating. You can talk about that movie for hours and hours and hours, and we basically did on our podcast. And then, Resurrection is kind of a disaster. We can skip over that one. And then if you go into the Ridley Scott prequel movies, again, not entirely successful, absolutely fascinating, I think. I think both of them. And the Fassbender performance makes those movies worthwhile, in my opinion. And I think they're gorgeous, gorgeous movies as well. So I think those are really cool additions to the universe, even if, as movies themselves, they're not maybe the best things ever, but you can't deny that again, an incredibly influential franchise, one stone cold perfect movie, and so many of them you could just talk about forever. Even Resurrection, you could talk about for a long time because that movie is bananas.
It is. It's unique. It's different. And this goes back to my pick with Mission Impossible. You have directors coming in and giving each movie their own unique stamp. And that is something that is really refreshing to see in any franchise, honestly, that brings in different voices. I hate Alien Resurrection, but in some ways I'm kind of happy that I hate it so much because the weirdness of it still exists. And say what you will about Prometheus and Alien Covenant, I'm not a big fan of those movies personally, but they get people talking and they have their defenders. And kudos to Ridley Scott for still making sci-fi movies that continue to divide audiences for better or for worse.
In the world of cookie cutter franchises that we have now, like Alien feels like this relic of creativity and risk.
Yeah. And we should also clarify, and I assume we're all on the same page with this. This does not include AVP.
No.
I would say no, certainly. No AVP.
I mean, the first AVP though, good movie.
It's
Second
not
one,
bad.
not
bad.
good. Not good. So.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting pick, Jay. I'll be honest. I didn't even have that franchise anywhere near being high on my list here.
Interesting. Okay.
And I think a lot of it comes down to
James Cameron,
the totality of the franchise. Because I agree with you guys that the first film is a masterpiece. I think it's really, really great. Where you and I differ, obviously, is in Aliens, where I do think the second half of that film is its own masterpiece. Any quibbles I have with it are really just in the first half of it, but I think that second film is almost every bit as good. And while I like Alien 3, that is by far the lesser of the three for me, but I do like it overall. The rest of that franchise, though, really jumps off a cliff for me. And where you're talking about even, in a world where things are cookie cutter and then you have the Prometheus films, a lot of that film, especially the last one, I feel is very cookie cutter. And I mean, some
last
of the
one was
stuff
a bit derivative, but I think it had some interesting horror.
Yeah, it's good. It has some really good ideas too and stuff.
I disagree. I think
the
latter film, the last one we've seen, is actively very bad. The first Prometheus has interesting ideas. Fassbender obviously gives a great performance in both of them, but there's so much about that franchise I'm just so mixed on, despite how much I love the first two.
Fair.
It's hard for me to really
definitely
have
a mixed bag
Max,
in the same way that Star Wars is a mixed bag.
But
the first
it's a fascinating.
Very fair.
There are more good films in the Star Wars universe than in the Alien universe. Get out of here.
But it is a fascinating mixed bag.
Okay, so for my next pick here, this is one that we argued a little bit offline, and maybe we'll have some disagreement here. I think that's perfectly fine. But for my next pick, I'm going with the new Planet of the Apes trilogy. And we are separating it out comparatively to its predecessors, particularly because there's one in the middle, the film we really don't want to mention, but kind of need to. The Tim Burton film really throws a lot of this for a loop in terms of continuity.
Thanks a lot, Tim Burton. Really appreciate it.
But I also think you could argue that while the new Apes trilogy does hint at connecting to the previous films. There's nothing really set in stone or concrete. Like the Star Wars prequel trilogy, we know from the very beginning is a direct prequel to the original Star Wars films. This new Planet of the Apes, there was nothing ever said. There's nothing ever concrete or direct that links it. There are things that it does that heavily suggest that the two are interlocked, but I don't think we can say concretely. And for that, I think it's very fair, more than fair, to separate them. And given the criteria we set for other franchises, it would be disingenuous for us to connect the two. So with that out of the way, I'm going with the new Planet of the Apes, which I've noted on the show, I think is as good as any trilogy as I've seen in the last 20 to 30 years. Big budget filmmaking or not, I love this franchise. I love the own risk that it takes, the storytelling, the emotion. Oh boy, the hashtag JD tears, the latter two films especially, those films provoke in me is absurd. I just find them so beautiful and poignant. The filmmaking, Andy Serkis should have at least been nominated for an Oscar. Criteria be damned. And for our own InSession Film Awards, he was nominated.
He was considered
for both of his performances in the latter two films. At least for me, I think it was the same for Brendan. But he's so great. What we get in terms of the ape dynamic in the second film, how that continues into the third film, and the themes that those films get into and the depths it goes to, I just think is really, really great. I don't really care so much for the human elements in the latter two films, but I don't think they're that distracting either. I don't think they're bad enough that it just completely dissolves the movies in any sort of way. But what we get with the ape character specifically is so, so good. And then you throw in all of the other elements with the cinematography and the music of those films and the technology overall. I mean, it's incredible how good the CGI is in this franchise. And it's so seamless when they're interacting, not just with each other, but even with their human counterparts. It's just so great. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I don't care what kind of filmmaking you're talking about. That new Planet of the Apes trilogy is as good as I've seen in the last 20 years. I love it. And it's my next pick here.
I feel like that franchise is in the right hands. I'm glad that JD has Planet of the Apes.
He's planted the ape. I was almost thinking about taking it at some point though, and I'm glad.
So are we back to me?
Yes, you are up again.
Okay, so circling back to me once again. Oh man, see this is where things get kind of tricky for me. I knew what I wanted to take with that pick, and now there's about 3 or 4 films I could go with here, or franchises, I should say. I am going to go with. Oh man, do I go subjective? Just really go for the JD pick?
You're the guy in the movie.
Go from the heart. Go with the heart.
You're the guy in the movie draft that took A History of Violence #1 So I Married a Movie Game.
That is true. Give me the JD special here.
Yeah, we want to.
I don't regret that.
I know you don't. I'm just saying, take what the heart wants, JD.
You know what? Okay, I do have some heart ones, but I'm going to go with a franchise that I think will help get me votes as well. And that is the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. I don't think that's been picked yet.
Okay.
Now, admittedly, the third film isn't up to par compared to the first two, and everyone talks about that second film more, but I still think that first film is more than good. I think there's a lot of great things happening in that film. Willem Dafoe especially goes for it. He really goes for it in that performance, and I love it. It's really fun. It's campy, but it's great. And I think the character building of Peter Parker in that film is really great. It ends on this somewhat somber note that I really love as well, leading into the second film. And I've given my thoughts on Spider-Man 2. We just did our 2004 retrospective, so I guess I don't need to go into that as much. But I, other than to reiterate, since it's important in the context of this conversation, that I do think it is the best superhero film ever made. That to me is number one. So that gives weight, at least for me, as to why I'm picking it here as well. In addition to how much I think the first one is overlooked, maybe. And the third one, again, flawed, but I still think is fun. I still think it has a lot to offer. So, especially with the Sam Raimi isms of the third film.
Yeah.
Even though you could tell that the studios really got in the way of that, but I think Raimi's fingerprint is still over the film enough that I was still able to enjoy. And overall, as a series, it's very, very unique, especially compared to a lot of the stuff we get today, which I still really like. But the Raimi films for me, love it. So that's my next pick here.
Yeah, you gotta love how goofy those movies are willing to be in that Raimi style. I love those movies as well. Certainly, those movies came out when I was 13 years old, I think, or something, 11, 12, something. So obviously I was like right in the wheelhouse for those movies. And I will say Spider-Man 3 was one of the early movies where I was like, I did not like that. Where it was like I was all teed up to like it and did not like it. But certainly the first two are monumental movies in their own right, and I do agree with you. Spider-Man 2 is certainly one of the greatest superhero movies ever made.
I prefer Spider-Man 1 as the best of the franchise, for me personally, but I do like Spider-Man 2 a lot. People think that because I don't think it's the greatest superhero movie of all time, then that I don't like the film. I love it. I mean, Doc Ock is such a cool villain that it's hard not to love all the emotionality and everything that's brought into that character. And Spider-Man 3, I mean, it's not a great film. I mean, Tobey Maguire kind of dancing down the street and all that. But I still think that the Sandman aspect of that film is extraordinary. And there are aspects of that movie that's really good. And I always did wish they would let Sam Raimi go out on his own terms and had continued his story. I know that there's like reports that Maguire won at like $50 million. He was kind of tired of it, but that's why he's kind of playing a little hard to get signed back up and to get into the spandex. Not like he's doing anything or anything, but no, it's a wonderful pick, JD, and it's probably the one first superhero trilogy that we got where everyone could agree that they at least liked it. Like, and they didn't outright just hate it, or there was a consensus of bad things. It really did feel like the first superhero trilogy that that we've had since now we have like so many trilogies now to date.
Yeah, and you can't really blame Sam Raimi for what happened with Spider-Man 3. And even despite that, there is still some artistic merit to that movie that you don't often see with a lot of superhero movies.
The Sandman sequence is fantastic.
It is. Yeah, and that's what I do appreciate about it.
Yeah. So
certainly a good pick there. Not the next one I was going to take, though, as it is my turn yet again here. However, I do feel like this is a sign to go back-to-back Raimi here, and I am going to take the Evil Dead franchise.
What a great pick.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a great
first well, I guess Alien is horror as well, but the first another horror franchise taken off the board here. I suppose back-to-back horror for me, but this is an awesome franchise. This is another one. It's very much in that Mad Max vein where this first movie was made for absolutely nothing. I don't think he fully realized the vision that he had. He got to scale up with each movie, whereas Evil Dead 1 is kind of like this schlock classic. Evil Dead 2, he really embraces the comedy while keeping it also very violent, very scary, but it has that Raimi tone that is so unique to Sam Raimi. And then with the third one, Army of Darkness, what a crazy flex that movie is. That was probably when the studios were like, we can't let him do Spider-Man 3. Did you see what he did with Army of Darkness? We can't let him do that again. Where he turns into this time-traveling fantasy movie.
Oh,
incredible.
Which is so good.
That's actually my favorite of the franchise, even though it is, it is, I think it was like rated PG or something, PG-13 maybe. But I love that movie. And I don't know if the recounts in the timeline of that franchise, but the remake is actually pretty good. It's not great, but it's far darker, more straightforward. But it stars Jane Levy, who is an actress that I just want to have a great career. I think she's such a good actress. She was in Don't Breathe as well, which was produced by Raimi. So she's in that Raimi family tree at this point. But the Evil Dead, that trilogy especially, I love. So that's my pick, Evil Dead.
That's a great pick, Jay. I mean, I love those Raimi films so much, and his sense of horror is my favorite horror director. I mean, like right now, like the way he does horror movies, they actually terrify me, and they do it with camp. Like it knows what it's trying to be.
Fun. I mean,
they're so confident,
extraordinarily violent, but it's so much fun.
Yeah, and I mean, even something like Drag Me to Hell. I mean, that movie is crazy good and crazy fun. It knows what it's trying to be. And then, like, I love the fact that the first film is a straight up horror movie, and then the second one turns into this horror comedy where he basically remakes the film. That's what Evil Dead 2 is. It is a remake, mostly of the second film. And then Army of Darkness is this out of bounds insane film that I agree with you, Jay, is my favorite of the franchise.
This is my boomstick.
And it's so good. It's so much fun. Yeah, I was thinking it might go a little later, but I'm totally fine with it going higher because it's just fun. We talk about fun. It's fun and it's movies. So you can't
6
fault
Raimis and 2 picks there.
I know. I did not expect Raimi to be shut out like this so early. We're not even at the 5th round yet.
I know.
We got some big boys on the board.
Yeah,
we do.
And we're dancing around it here.
Before we move on, I also want to note, and this is funny because it ties into what we said earlier in the show, but we're almost at 2 hours and still have a whole 5 other rounds to go. So we got
to be quick.
We gotta go.
Let's be quick. Let's be quick. All right. So I think at this point now, because we do have some heavy hitters still on the board, I think some of our next picks are going to be a little self-explanatory, I guess. So maybe we can be a bit brief with some of these, but we talk about influence and how some of these franchises have influenced films for better and even for worse. And I sort of did that with the Dark Knight trilogy, but I'm going to go with another trilogy here as it is my next pick, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, because Jay just took the Evil Dead. So I'm going to go with what I think is the most influential trilogy of Westerns ever made, and that is the Man with No Name trilogy.
Yep,
specifically Fistful of Dollars, which is a direct remake of Yojimbo, made by one of my all-time favorite filmmakers in Akira Kurosawa. And then you got For a Few Dollars More. And then you've also got The Great, the Good, the Bad, the Ugly, which is basically the movie that gave Quentin Tarantino a career. So just because of how much that influenced him, and he's often cited that as his favorite movie. So just for those reasons, you can't deny how that movie, along with a few other Westerns, such as like Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch, for instance, that really took Westerns and just took away the glorification of them. And that would become more literal with something like Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood, even decades later. But I feel like Sergio Leone was doing that way back in the 1960s, and that influence there, I think, is self-explanatory. So the Man with No Name trilogy is my pick here.
No, that's a wonderful pick, Brendan. I had that one on the board. Wasn't quite the one I was going to take next. So, but still, great stuff. You can't go wrong with some good old classic Westerns. And Sergio Leone, I mean, one of the greatest directors of all time. Well, it's back to me. It's snaked all the way back to me for my 4th round pick. And well, gentlemen, if Brendan's going to go with some classics, I think I might as well go with some classics. I might as well take these off the board. It's no secret because Brendan talked about it earlier. Me and him reviewed one of these entries earlier this year, and we did all the rest of them on the main show this year. And of course, I will be taking the Godfather trilogy. Say what you want about Godfather 3. The first 2 are Best Picture winners. They're some of the all-time greatest films ever made.
Debatable,
by some degrees and standards around here. But
Part 2 is pretty good.
They stand the test of time. They're some of the greatest films I've ever made. Part 3 people love it or hate it. I'm really curious to see this new director's cut kind of thing that's coming out.
I actually am too.
And
I've got
think,
it pre-ordered. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm so down to watch that. And I know that, for a franchise, I've always just been sort of curious as to why they've never really tried to tap back into it, even without Coppola. Everybody does it all the time now. It would just be interesting to see maybe if there was a modern retelling or continuation of the story and how that would all unfold. But yeah, as it stands, that trilogy, great movies. You can't say anything wrong about those. But I'm just going to move straight into my next pick, and I'm going to take this. And I cannot believe this is still on the board, but I'm going to take this, and this includes some stuff from the old and definitely some newer entries. I'm going to take the Rocky franchise, which also will include the Creed films.
I think I would agree. I agree.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
The Rocky franchise is so crazy. I mean, you have a Best Picture winner in there. You have a Rise and Fall. You have crazy sequels. I mean, you literally have Rocky fighting the Soviet Union. I mean, that is insane.
He ended the Cold War in a movie that I don't even like all that much. He still ended the Cold War.
I mean, he beat Mr. T. He beat Hulk Hogan. His rival becomes his best friend.
It's one of the classic. This movie is no good, but man, do I love it. I mean, it really is. Like,
it has no business being that much fun. Right. And then, Rocky Balboa, I think is like a really,
I think it's
a good
movie
that
nobody talks about, because it just sort of came and went and people kind of forget about it. And then the Creed films, we're all on here saying that these two Creed films, especially even the last one too, are really good films, and they dive into the mythology and the mythos of those characters through generations. It's extraordinary,
I gotta say, the more I think about these Creed films, I find myself slowly appreciating Creed 2 even more than maybe even Coogler's film. And that's saying something.
Creed 2 is a miracle. Like, it's a miracle that, I remember when Creed was announced, I was like, this is the stupidest. Hollywood is completely out of ideas. They are creatively bankrupt.
And then you saw it.
And then lo and behold, we get Coogler, and it's like, whoa, this might be the best Rocky movie. Holy crap.
Yeah. And then this nobody comes in, Steve Capel Jr., who was well acquainted with Ryan Coogler, comes in and makes Creed 2. And in my opinion, is this the best Rocky sequel? I mean, it's at least in the conversation.
No,
I agree.
They're fantastic films. And I mean, it's sort of spawned Michael B. Jordan into a superstar level, and Coogler even before Black Panther. And I mean, now I'm dying to see what they're going to do with the third film whenever they decide to do that. I mean, and it is consistently a very good franchise. Like there's maybe one or two entries that you go, yeah, but for the most part, it's a really solid, fun franchise. And we love all sports. It is the best sports franchise, for sure. And that's crazy because boxing isn't the most popular sport still in America. And yet it's the best
sport for movies, though.
Yeah, for sure.
I would agree with that too. It kind of hurts me because this was probably going to be my next pick, considering that it's not even just that. I mean, everyone here knows, or at least on this show specifically, that I do reside in Philadelphia right now, and this is a staple of the city. So I kind of felt like I needed to pick it. So I think I failed my fellow city of brotherly Lovians right now. But needless to say, I'm glad it gets a home. And it is a great franchise. I definitely considered it. And with my next pick, it is my turn next as we snake around this. I've got 3 picks here. Do I go with my head? Do I go with my heart? Or do I go with my gut? My heart is powerful, but my gut is such an out-of-the-box pick. I'm almost tempted. Well, it's not really an out-of-the-box pick, but it might be out of the box to do this early. But I think I'm going to go with it just because I like to change the game a little bit. I'm going to go with the Muppets for my next pick.
No! And there goes Jay. I'd say you made the right pick.
You killed Jay. He's pacing, folks.
Let's paint the picture for the audio listeners.
Yes.
As soon as Brendan made the pick, Jay literally stood up, walked off camera and is just pacing back and forth in his room, and now he's got a Kermit with him.
He got his Kermit.
Wow.
He loves the Muppets.
my
You
God.
monster.
It's not like Jay, you had the opportunity. You had chances.
I am
playing
seriously
strategically when it came to that one.
I am seriously laughing way too hard right now. I should not be drinking beer. I have to leave and use the bathroom at some point pretty soon. But
Seriously, podcast listeners, check out the video. Check out the video.
Got a Kermit.
He's got Kermit on his shoulder right now.
this portion of the live stream will be sliced and diced for our YouTube channel.
Yes.
We need this for our records.
Oh,
stuff.
poor Jay.
Wow.
Truly a sad moment for me.
Oh my God.
I will simply say I'm sorry, Jay. I grew up with these movies, as I'm sure everyone on this show, as well as everyone listening. I remember owning the VHS tape of The Muppets Take Manhattan and actually watching it so much that it ruined the tape.
Yeah.
It's one of those franchises that I think also has made probably the best adaptation of A Christmas Carol that we'll ever see. And the fact that you can say that about the Muppets, I think is saying something.
Sure.
So I guess for those reasons and the power of it and the fact that it's still relevant. I mean, we often joke about the fact that the Oscars going hostless. Why can't they get the Muppets to host the Oscars? I think it was William Bibiani, a critic for The Wrap, that said that. And I think it's a splendid idea. They're always going to be relevant.
Yeah.
So just the relevancy
Disney
of it,
Plus, put the Muppet Show on Disney Plus.
Please.
It's
Yeah, right
ridiculous.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even that original movie, the original Muppet movie, is
Oh,
one of my
it's
favorite
incredible.
movie musicals. It's
Yeah.
it's really great.
And then the remakes are the one, you know,
They're
that
good.
Stoller and Jason Segel did, you know,
Yeah,
I mean,
they're
they're great. I mean, you know,
Yeah, they're good.
oh, Muppets. I had that on the
Yeah.
board too. Oh,
Good
what a
stuff,
great
guys.
pick.
Good stuff.
Yep. All right. Okay. I guess I'm up now. A really devastating pick for me. I have my big board. They're number 3 in my favorite on my power ranking board, but I was trying to play strategically. I thought that would be a 6th, 7th round
Yeah, me too. Jay.
selection for me, but here we are. Lo and behold, I'm going to go a little gamesmanship here. I'm going to take. No, I'm not. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go with
change.
my heart here. I'm changing on the fly. I'm going with the Oceans trilogy. Steven
Oh,
Soderbergh.
man, that was going to be my next pick.
I'm going with
Damn.
the Oceans trilogy plus Oceans 8, I suppose, as well, which is a perfectly fine movie.
Yeah, it ties in. It ties in. Yeah.
But the Steven Soderbergh Oceans trilogy, I think Oceans 11 is the greatest blockbuster of the 21st century. I think it is a pretty much perfect movie, an incredible combination of style and cast and
so efficient.
story.
Yeah.
It's just, it flies by and it's so stylish and fun and endlessly entertaining. And then you guys talked about it on the retrospective show. Oceans 12 is like a total change up that Soderbergh throws, where he makes this French New Wave ocean.
I was gonna say,
movie.
yeah, the most expensive French New Wave movie ever made.
Yeah, and I love that movie. I love the meta elements of that movie. It's one that when I first saw it, I wasn't crazy about, but now I think, like many others, I love that movie almost as much as I do the first one. And Ocean's 13 is also very fun, kind of a remix of the original, going back to the well. But it's definitely a lot of fun. Pacino's having a blast in that one. But for me, really, it's those first two that are top tier, upper echelon movies, and it makes for an incredible trilogy. And then Ocean's 8 is a fun little addition as well, although certainly lesser than the Soderbergh entries.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, we did just talk about Ocean's 12 during our 2004 retrospective on the main show, which I know I was higher on than you were, JD, during the middle of that conversation. But needless to say, like you said, Jay, it's one of the most expensive art films, I think, at least in the caper genre, and it's meant to subvert expectations, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's great. I know JD is not as huge a fan, but
Look,
it's great.
Oh, you still like it, JD?
I literally just mentioned I was going to pick it next.
Yeah.
So obviously, Jay and I were on the same wavelength.
Yep.
Our only disparity is how you guys feel about the third film is how I feel about the second film, and vice versa. I think the third film is really great on the levels that you guys were talking about the second film.
It's still so much fun.
So I
regardless.
mean,
It is.
so
It's a
really
blast.
overall we feel the same about the trilogy, and that we love it. even if for different reasons, obviously.
Yeah, even Ocean's 8, like we talked
And
about, it's fun. It's still a fun movie.
It sounds like I'm higher on that movie than Jay. So in theory, mathematically, I think I like this trilogy more than Jay does. So
maybe that may be true. The quadrilogy. Yeah.
Are you asking for a trade right now, JD?
Yeah, I will trade you that pick, and you can have my 5th and 6th round picks.
No, don't do it.
Let's not make this too complicated.
Yeah, you lost me already.
Okay, so as we round out the 5th round here, I mentioned last time that I wanted to go with my heart and ended up going with I went with the Raimi Spider-Man films, mostly because I think that would pander to the voting body, if you will. My next pick probably won't do that, or at the very least, it's going to be polarized. It certainly has its fans. I know I'm at least going to get Josh Larson's vote. My next selection here is The Hunger Games, which I'm 99.9% positive that I'm way higher on this franchise than you guys are.
I like the first half of that franchise.
You've never talked to me about them, JD. So.
I'm certainly assuming some things here, especially with Ryan and Jay. Let's be honest. I'm not assuming with Jay. I know Jay doesn't like these films like I do.
The best thing we got out of The Hunger Games was Red Sparrow.
Okay, so agree to disagree there.
To be fair, Red Sparrow is a pretty darn good movie.
I like 3 out of the 4 movies in here, and I actually think the best one in this franchise is Catching Fire, and they're really good, and I do really like Francis Lawrence's direction of action in this franchise. And so you got a fan in me on this. It's not a whole 100%. It's about a 90% endorsement, I would say, maybe 85. But take it. Take it and run with it.
I got to jump in here for a sec before you continue, JD, and we're sorry we're cutting you off, but we talked about in the early half of this show times that we've disagreed. And I think the Hunger Games franchise might be our biggest disagreement, honestly, the more I think about it, because there's one movie in this franchise I don't care for, and I think it's your favorite of the 4, and that's Mockingjay Part 1.
Yeah. Yeah, so I love the Mockingjay films. I probably agree with you, Ryan, that Catching Fire is the best of the films. I still think the first one is really good. I kind of like how chaotic the filmmaking is.
The first one by Gary Ross is actually my favorite of all of them, because I love how visceral that is.
Yeah, it is very visceral.
And honestly, I'm surprised it got away with the PG-13 rating.
Yeah, it is quite visceral. I do agree. The Mockingjay films I love because, one, I do think they're visceral in some way, but I mostly love them because I think the psychology is riveting. And Jennifer Lawrence gives a performance that I think outdoes a lot of what she did in that franchise prior to. And she really makes it. But I kind of feel about Part 1 the same way I feel about Harry Potter, like the final film in that. And because I love Part 1 of Deathly Hallows way more than Part 2 because it slows down, it's methodical, it's all about its character building and psychology. And that's what Part 1 is. It doesn't care about action, it doesn't really care about world building as much. It's all about psychology, it's all about character building. So when you get to Part 2 and it's all chaotic, a lot of what we see there, the action, there's weight to it because of what comes before it. And I just absolutely found it riveting. It's really, really fantastic. So again, I know it's polarized and it has its passionate fans for sure. And maybe that's what I'm relying on here in terms of votes. But as far as franchises go, especially in the modern age, I will go to bat for this franchise quite a bit. I really love them. I
think it's mostly good. Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with that. I do actually have to say, at least those first 2 films, I have to respect it for basically taking the most literal battle royale adaptation, putting it in a setting that involves children, and still taking it seriously. Because one of the biggest things I worried about with that franchise was that it was going to almost inadvertently glorify that kind of violence just for the sake of fun and teen mentality. And it doesn't really do that. There is a sophistication to at least those first 2 films that I really do appreciate.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think it treats all of that diligently, and obviously is making a commentary on it in the end.
Yeah,
So
it's certainly not for it, which I do appreciate too.
yeah, absolutely. All right, before we move on to the next 5 rounds, as we start round 6, we're gonna quick little plug here. Actually, a couple of quick plugs. One. I just want to say a big thank you to everyone that supports this show. We talk about this each and every week, but your support really means the world to us. It's what makes this go alongside our great wives, allowing this to take place. There are a couple of great ways to help us out. One, if you leave us reviews on iTunes, that gives visibility to the show, and it really means a lot to us. And we would love to read them here on the air. It only takes a minute or so. So if you could leave us a review on iTunes, we would greatly appreciate it. Another way to help us is Patreon. Patreon.com/InSessionFilm is where you can find us. There are several levels there. We got rewards up there for everyone to check out. You can sign up for as low as $1 a month. You can go all the way down to $10 a month, whatever fits your billing there. And like I said, we have some perks we think that you will really like. So again, you can check all of that out at patreon.com/InSessionFilm.
And JD, this is where I plug next week's show. Is that correct?
No, this is where we plug. Well, we can, I guess. Sure.
Yeah, because we talked about this before. This is what's beautiful about a live show, is that we talk about things and we forget about it in the middle of the actual live show.
Yeah, halfway through, we're just switching up things. So let's do it.
Well, I actually feel like this is the perfect time to do so, because we're in the middle of a break, and you just talked about Patreon, and something that we do when it comes to Patreon is that we review a movie of your choosing. If you decide to become a Patreon for us, you get to select a movie for us to review on the show, and we'll eventually get to it. And we have a backlog of movies that we're trying to get through. And one of them is, at this point, JD, as we talk about potentially what we are hoping to talk about, maybe possibly talking about on next week's show in episode 401. Can you believe it's episode 401? Now that I say that, it's ridiculous. But we did get a great Patreon donation to talk about Richard Linklater's Dazed and Confused. So I currently have that on our schedule for episode 401. That is, if we don't get access to a little movie called Wolfwalkers, which I know has been the talk of the town amongst all of our film critics circles right there. And we'll see how things go with that. But at this point now, episode 401, look out for that. There might be some Linklater on the horizon.
Yeah, there just may be. I would love to get you that film, Brendan. If we could work that out, that would be great. But either way, I mean, Dazed and Confused certainly can't go wrong with there. So I would very much look forward to that. All right, let's get back to the draft here as we start round 6. And that would be back to me as we are sneaking back. And
that's back to you.
Okay, so where to go from here? Certainly a couple to choose from. You know what? I'm going to go with another heart pick, and because this is a series of films, a trilogy of films that I will champion for the rest of my days, and I know that I'm going to be in a minority when it comes to it, and that's perfectly fine. But I think the How to Train Your Dragon series is as good as Toy Story.
I knew you were going to do it. I
do.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Again,
in fact,
that series is in the right hands.
Yeah, it's in the right hands.
Yeah, look, I love Toy Story like everyone else does.
For the reason.
I do. Exactly. Look, I love Pixar. Do not get me wrong, but I think How to Train Your Dragon is as good. And I've noted before, I think the second film in particular is the best animated sequel of all time. The first film is spectacular. The third film, I think, is very good. It's the lesser of the 3, but still very good. And boy, the JD tears were a-flowing at the end of that film in particular. I love what that series has to offer in terms of character, in terms of its lore, its playfulness, its goofiness.
I feel like things got really quiet for a second.
We seem to have lost JD's audio.
Yeah, JD.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't hear him.
I can't
JD
hear him
has been
either.
lost, and because of that, I'm going to go forward with my next pick.
Just keep the time rolling.
Because we did hear what he picked, which was How to Train Your Dragon. So I will be moving on to my selection, and I think, you know what, guys, I think it's time. I think the giant shadow needs to be removed from this game, and we need to take. We have to. This is where it needs to go. As I'm looking at these other blockbuster franchises, it is the best, the most consistent of these franchises, and I am going to pick the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
What?
I'm picking the MCU. And the MCU is a collection of consistently good movies with a few outliers of pretty darn great movies, and not very many not very good ones, right? I mean, this has been one of the most important film franchises in the history of American art. Again, maybe not for entirely good reasons, but look, I mean, you look at a movie like Black Panther, both of the Guardians movies are some of my favorites. I think Iron Man 3 is an incredibly special film from Shane Black. Avengers kind of upended all expectations and managed to create movies with so many characters that are comprehensible and very fun. And I think it's a very effective film franchise. And if I'm being honest, one that is bound to play in the polls. So I am taking the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
You hack. You absolute sellout.
No. If you look at what else is on the board, we are into, for the most part, flawed territory. And I think Marvel has a degree of consistency that these other franchises are lacking. A lot of them.
I think that's fair. And we are playing to the market at this point now, as you were saying. That's sort of why I picked the Dark Knight trilogy, because that is only 2 out of 3 films that I do love. But at the same time, I know how powerful of a fan base that is. So with that said, I get it.
MCU has a higher hit rate than Star Wars or James Bond. They have a higher batting average than both of those franchises.
I disagree with that, but okay.
Can you guys hear me? Sorry, I was having some audio issues.
We can hear you now. And we apologize for cutting you off middle of your How to Train Your Dragon pathos there, because we love to hear that, but we just kind of kept going.
Yeah.
No, it's good.
No,
it's good. I had an audio issue there, but I guess just real fast to speak to what you're saying there, Jay. I've been debating when to go with this, because I really did want to go with it the previous 2 rounds, but I wasn't exactly sure. I was trying to do the gamesmanship thing, but I agree with you. As much as I love something like Star Wars, and the original trilogy is phenomenal, the prequel trilogy, this new trilogy, is a very mixed bag. The spin-off films for me are a mixed bag as well. The MCU, at the very least, has been very, very consistent. Mm-hmm. I mean, even its lower films, I think, are still more satisfying than the lower films in Star Wars.
I agree.
And its highs, I think, are really great. Maybe not Star Wars, like OG Star Wars, great, but still absolutely really great. And it's a ton of fun. The consistency and the fact that it exists, I think, is a miracle.
Yeah,
because
it is genuinely nice to go to the movies and know that you are going to be entertained for 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, and think about that genre prior to Iron Man. It was pretty much dead in the water. Like the X-Men films had somewhat revived things, and then Nolan came along, but what Nolan was doing was very different. That was never going to be what the MCU is today. That was always a contained trilogy. What the MCU set out to do was something we had never seen in this genre before. Maybe in other genres or other types of films, but not in the superhero genre that was kind of teetering at that point.
Right,
and then you take all these characters from other films and put them in we had never seen anything like that before. And the fact that that first Avengers happened and then it blew up the way it did, it's still a miracle to me that happened the way it did. And then of course now here we are now, and I love it. I mean, it was it was probably going to be. I was teetering between that and How to Train Your Dragon. Obviously, I went with.
I mean, and Endgame was an incredibly satisfying ending to that era of the MCU. And now,
I agree.
who knows? Maybe now they'll start making some bold movies here. The direction they're going with, like a movie like The Eternals. I had never heard of The Eternals in the same way that I had never heard of Guardians of the Galaxy, and now that's my favorite element of the MCU. So maybe they'll go a little more into that. And Chloe Zhao, are you kidding me? That's crazy. I mean,
when they go weird. Yeah. So we'll see how things go. And I did mention back with my last pick when I upset Jay with my Muppets pick. I mentioned how I was torn between 3 options, going with my head, my heart, or my gut. And I ended up going with my gut, and I'm glad I did. My head pick was actually the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I'm surprised it still got all the way around almost back to me before it got actually taken away.
Yeah.
So my heart pick is still on the table. And I'm going to change things up and go with my heart pick. I don't know how well it's going to do for me when it comes to these results, but I am going with Richard Linklater's Before trilogy for my next pick. And Ryan's not happy.
Every time.
Yeah. But, in similar ways to why we grew up with something like the Toy Story franchise that I picked way earlier in this draft, we grew up with this franchise literally for very different reasons, though, for more artistic reasons, for more emotional reasons, for more romantic reasons. And each installment seems to be a reflection of how we adapt to our current relationship status. And that makes your allegiance for each movie sometimes different. Sometimes it changes as you grow and as you develop. And the best franchises know how to evolve with its audience. And I think this is a franchise that knowingly does that. So for those reasons, I don't think there's anything else I can say about it, because we've all expressed how much we love this franchise, or at least most of us have.
Yeah.
3 out of 4 of us, at least.
Yeah, well, I know Jay's caught up with a few of them, and I know he loved Before Sunset.
No, I've watched all of them. I like them. I'm not crazy about Midnight. Sorry, is that right?
It's Midnight, the third one, right?
Yeah. I'm not crazy about Midnight. The first 2 I think are very, very good, and the first one got a lot better in my mind when I saw the second one, just to seeing the evolution of them as people and them reflecting on that first movie. I think
because that first film is absolutely about the cynicism of 20-somethings and the reflection of that. So basically, I don't know if that was their intent. The second film deconstructs that completely, and that's what makes it so
the second film is
fascinating.
my favorite. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I guess just quickly to speak to it, if we were just talking about artistic integrity, this is a first round pick for me. But if we're pandering to votes, it was hard for me to have this in the first 5 rounds. But I'm with you, Brennan. It would have been one of my next selections for sure. Yeah. But for me, it is my favorite trilogy. So, it's what makes it hard when we're asking for votes at the very end of this. So that's how we're choosing to pick things.
We got to go back and forth.
It's difficult, but that's a great pick, obviously.
Yeah, no, it's a good pick. Once again, Brendan has stolen the pick that I wanted to select here. No, it's okay. It's fine. No,
I'm not sorry. Actually,
I know you're not, and I don't care. So I guess I now have back-to-back picks here. And
so let's see if you steal one of mine now. We'll turn the tables here.
I doubt it. But look, there's a ton of one. Jay mentioned it starts getting into the sort of nitty-gritty territory of these franchises, because you have to sort of defend at least why you want to have them, and I think that makes it for a fascinating conversation.
Perfect territory.
Yeah, but I still think that there are some franchises where their sums outweigh the whole. And as for my next pick, look, I obviously love spy genres. I love, James Bond. I love Mission Impossible, as Brendan took. I'm going to take something that not a lot of people know that I actually really love. And these are films that I watched a ton of times. And I know JD really likes these films too, because he saw them a lot recently this year. I'm going to take the Pirates of the Caribbean.
I love this pick. Yes.
I'm going to take.
Yeah. You do your thing. I was actually thinking about that one, so I'm mad. You have fun.
Look. I understand that the Rob Marshall fourth film is awful, and the fifth film is okay. It's not great. It tried to do like a sort of continuation of it, and it did it to fine effect and whatnot. But those first 3 films I will defend for the
Same.
rest of my life
Same.
as one of the best trilogies of all time. Like those movies, talking about capital F, capital U, capital N, fun, just fun. And I love the back and forthness of the sequels just as much as I love the original. Like the original
I
first
mean, the
film,
first one is far superior to the sequels. In my opinion,
the first one is fantastic. But then the sequels are, I think, within the same vein as the first one. They have that element of piracy throughout the entireness of those two films. The sort of darkness and grittiness that Gore Verbinski brings within his action and his performances. It's top tier Depp. It's top tier Keira Knightley. It's top tier Bloom before, John. And it's also, like I said, it's got a great villain from Bill Nighy and Davy Jones. The sort of special effects with that
Jeffrey
still
Rush,
hold up to this
Jeffrey
day.
Rush
Jeffrey Rush is phenomenal in these movies. He should have
won an Oscar.
He should have. He's so good.
He's so good.
And I'm telling you, they are so much fun. There's a reason why I think that maybe down the road in a future movie series, Gore Verbinski would be somebody I would want to talk about because of the fact we don't talk enough about his visual eye and what he brings to films and their franchises. So yeah, Pirates of the Caribbean. I'll take all the flack for the last two, and I get it. They're not that great, but I'm picking it because of this really great trilogy for the first three entries.
It's a good pick. Those are wild
Believing
movies.
in ghost stories, Miss Turner. You're in one.
I mean,
Jeffrey Rush rocks.
They're ridiculous. They're ridiculously fun. I absolutely love them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good
I
pick.
love that pick.
So it's my next pick here, and I'm gonna go with another franchise that I think is probably better than a lot of people give it credit for. And you know what? Actually, no, I'm not gonna take that one. I'll wait for that one to come around. I'm actually going to go with another franchise that maybe has a great trilogy in it, but also has some latter films that aren't great either. I'm going to take the Jason Bourne trilogy. I'm going to take the Bourne franchise.
Yeah.
Say what you want about, the Pills and Jeremy Renner film and the Kims or whatever those were called, and say what you want about
that
Greengrass.
last one is so bad.
Say what you want about that film as a whole, even though I think the action in it's great, the story is terrible. I agree with you. Those first three Jason Bourne films are some of the best spy films ever made. They are fantastic. And they are, for me, Pete Greengrass. Like, I don't think Paul Greengrass in Sense Supremacy, and especially Ultimatum is one of the best action movies ever made. Like, for hands down, great. And say what you want about Doug Liman, as a journeyman or whatnot, but he does a great job in Identity of setting the tone of that.
I like it a lot.
Those three movies are extraordinary and changed a lot of how we see sort of spy movies now today. I mean, Bond literally copied for the Craig films the style in which those Jason Bourne films are made. They're highly influential. The action, I think without a film like The Bourne Identity, we don't get something that goes above or goes beyond that with John Wick. I don't think that exists because of the fact that it's so much hand-to-hand combat. There's so much there done. I think Matt Damon is extraordinary in those films. And you have so many great character actors like Joan Allen and Brian Cox and Chris Cooper, David Strathairn, all within this world. The late, great Albert Finney. I mean, it's a really great franchise. I wish they would kind of actually have a script. That's the problem with these movies is they don't have scripts going in. They kind of
I'm not sure how well they've aged.
I rewatched them recently, and I'd tell you this:
the first three
out of the zeitgeist a little bit.
I think the first three are still very good. In fact, Bourne Ultimatum might still be my favorite Paul Greengrass film.
Yeah, it's really good, and I think also too they're movies that people kind of forget about Legacy, and they forget about the new one so much because of the fact that those first three are so good and so great.
A lot of people does not exist. Like, it just does not exist.
People never talk about that, but when they talk about Greengrass, they talk about Bourne and they talk about, of course, Captain Phillips and United 93. But
yeah,
really, those Bourne films are what put him on another.
Does anything define Matt Damon more in terms of his legacy?
No, I probably not. I mean, those are the
when
movies
you bring
that put
his
him
name
on
up. Are
superstar
these the
level.
films that come to mind? first.
Goodwill Hunting.
Good Hill Hunting, maybe.
Maybe.
But after that, I mean, I think these are the movies that kind of put him on another stratosphere. It's kind of what Paul Rudd says in the 40-year-old virgin. It's one of my favorite jokes ever. It's like they're in the storeroom and Born Identity's on the background. He's like, I always thought Matt Damon was kind of a Streisand, but he really kicks ass in this one. And so that's what I think, Matt Damon takes the next step in his career. And yeah, I don't think he's the guy we see now without these films.
Yeah,
I agree.
They're very good films. They are very, very good films. I did have them on my board, not quite this early, actually. I thought I was maybe be able to save this for some picks down the road. But looking at my list now, I've got a superhero trilogy. I've got an action franchise. I've got some more playful options with Toy Story and the Muppets, and something artful with Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight. So, oh man, this is hard, but I think I need to diversify just a little bit more. And we are recording this in the middle of October. It's close to Halloween.
Oh, yeah.
I have to take a horror franchise, and I'm going to go with something that I think is probably the most consistent horror franchise as far as quality.
Wolfman?
Not Wolfman. I'm going with Scream for my picks here.
Okay.
And I say that because there's 4 movies, so it's not as there's not as many films when you compare it to something like some of the other horror franchises that it exists around. But Scream, I think, works for 2 reasons. One, like I said, it's more consistent. I don't think there's an outright bad movie of the 4. There are some certainly weaker than others, but I think those first 2 Scream films do a very good job deconstructing the genre. And for that reason, the franchise itself is a deconstruction of the slasher genre, and I think that does a great job having some fun playing with it. Wes Craven knew what he was up against and sort of made a commentary on his own career, and he was starting to do that with the movie New Nightmare, which is a commentary on the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, but then he took it even further with the slasher franchise here, and I think he made a very fun franchise. So I'm going to go with Scream next, just to give my list a little bit of diversity and to really celebrate the month of October here.
I've actually only seen the first Scream, so I cannot really speak to the franchise.
It's arguably the best of the 3, or I mean 4, I should say. But I do really like Scream 2. I think they are both equal for different reasons.
I like Scream 3 a lot.
Scream 3 is probably the most. I don't want to say it's the most meta of the 4. I think they all got more meta as they went along.
Yeah, that's what's great about it is a running commentary on itself and sort of the entire genre,
like subgenre.
Yeah. No, it's a really good pick, and I agree with you, Brendan, because there's so many other franchises that within the horror genre that, I mean, once you start getting into the minutia of all of it, there are a lot of bad movies in some of these ones. Even something like Scream 4, which I'm not like the biggest fan of, it has a lot of fans within the franchise. So
yeah,
and they have a new entry coming out too.
Yeah, they do. And I think the opening of Scream 4, at least the first like 5 to 10 minutes, I think is what that's what makes that movie worth seeing alone.
That's what makes all of those movies is just how they set those up. Yeah, it's great.
Good stuff. All right.
Alrighty. Okay. I suppose it is my turn now. And this is one that I'm kind of surprised is still on the board. I feel like it's because it has a third entry that isn't as remembered as its 2 predecessors. But the original film is one of the most iconic films of the last 50 years.
God damn it,
and I am going to take the Robert Zemeckis trilogy Back to the Future. Which is such an undeniably fun trilogy. And again, it's one that really kind of changes up the dynamic with each movie. The first one is, I mean, just one of the most just stone cold great screenplays in the history of studio filmmaking. It's just like, I know that the time traveling dynamics do not really work, but the pacing of the film, the directions that the film goes, the character work is so clean. It's just such a well designed film, and it's so unbelievably fun. Marty McFly gives just a stellar movie star performance, and obviously Christopher Lloyd as Doc Brown, just, I mean, iconic. There's so much about that movie that's iconic. The DeLorean, I mean, it's all so wonderful. And then Back to the Future 2 is just crazy. It's just like
bananas. It's bananas.
It's so wild. And when you go back and watch that movie, it established so much of what 90s aesthetic was. The design of that movie was so influential. And then Back to the Future 3, which is Robert Zemeckis wanting to make a Western, is a perfectly fun movie as well. I like that it was a doc-centric film. I really enjoyed that element of it. Mary Steenburgen, I think, is great in the film. Certainly the lesser of the three, but going from the just really buttoned up tight storytelling of the first to the crazy Biff story of the second one, and then the Doc Brown love story third one. I think it's a really, really fun trilogy.
Indeed. I agree. This was probably going to be my next pick. And
I honestly thought the other two films in the franchise, because they're sort of hit or miss for certain people, that was going to give me some clout to pick it later, but I guess not.
I think 2 is kind of universally loved. Like
it is now. It wasn't at the time.
I love 2. 2 is actually my favorite in the trilogy.
Oh, wow.
I love 2 a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
I watched 2 so much when I was a kid. Yeah, I love that movie. And I actually like the third one too. I know people 3 one is a lot of fun because I loved Westerns. I grew up on Westerns. And so all those sort of homage to Clint Eastwood Westerns and everything like that.
Time Travel and Train. What more do you need?
Time and Train and Doc Brown's relationship with Mary Steenburgen. I mean, like it's a good movie. Yeah, good. They're good movies. Not a big fan of Robert Zemeckis as a whole, but those movies are actually really, really good. And I'm glad
he had a run there where he was making banger after banger.
Yeah, and then he made Forrest Gump.
He was.
And then he went full Marwin.
Yeah, then he made Forrest Gump. And, we don't talk about it anymore.
All right, moving on to my next pick. We're going to avoid that rabbit hole. And actually, before I do, if you guys will indulge me, obviously, as I was talking about How to Train Your Dragon, I was having some audio issues. So I just want to briefly backtrack to that, just to speak on that real fast. Since my audio cut out or whatnot, but essentially when it comes to How to Train Your Dragon, there is, as Brennan somewhat joked about a second ago, there is the pathos of it and how much it speaks to me, but it isn't just the emotion. And I do think all the emotion is earnest. It's genuine. It's well earned. But I think the writing of that series is great. I love the bold risk it takes. It essentially, the second film is The Lion King in many respects. And there's not many animated films that are going to those lengths for the sake of drama or character building. And there's also just the animation, which for my money, arguably the best animated movies in terms of how evocative they are. It's incredible how breathtaking those films look. The flying sequences especially are stunning. Absolutely stunning.
Honestly, How to Train Your Dragon 2 is like Lord of the Rings, like epic awesomeness.
And in the world of world building, when it comes to animation, there are times I'm watching that and think, this is basically a CGI version of a Hayao Miyazaki film. And it has some of that same like elaborations that I really like.
Absolutely. And I didn't even get a chance to mention the score for those films, which is for my money,
pretty
one
iconic.
of the best scored animated films I've ever heard. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's great.
In terms of artistic prowess, I think those films have everything Toy Story does. And that essentially is why, for me, I equate the two and why I wanted to go with it. So thanks for indulging me on that as I get to my next pick. But also, I guess, somewhat keeping that in mind because I was dealing with the technical side of it. If my next pick was already chosen and I missed it when dealing with that, just kind of forgive me and let me know. But
the
90s Batman films, they're still on the board.
They're still on the board, and I hate you so much.
They're now off the board. I'm going with them here. Obviously, the first two, iconic. We talked about them a few weeks, or I guess a few months ago during the summertime, I think. So I won't go into them as much, but I love those films. And we talked about Batman Forever, and I will go to bat for that film. I know it's a flawed movie, but I love its bold weirdness and just how unique it is. So for me, that, while not artistically as good as the first two, it still has so much to offer. It's really only the last film, the George Clooney film, in that bunch that I really could, I
so
could do
good.
that.
So good.
But it does have its cheesy campiness, admittedly.
I still see you.
It is fun. So that's, for me, it's the worst by far, but still attainable in many ways because of its campiness. So there is that.
Can I ask, because JD, you and Jay reviewed Batman Forever together, and at that time, Jay, you had said that you even preferred Batman and Robin by a slight margin because you at least admired its consistency. But I think you said that you sort of reversed that a little bit because of how abstract and weird that Forever actually is.
Yeah, it was just a case of ambition versus success. Whereas I think Batman and Robin shoots far lower than Forever. I did come to admire the audacity of Batman Forever, which is just a bizarre, insane movie.
It would not get made today.
No, it would definitely not get made today. No,
are you kidding me?
So I think you got to respect that. I love the film.
No?
So for those reasons, I'm going to go with Batman for my pick here. For my next one, as we snake to the next round here, Jay, you just kind of mentioned this dichotomy of ambition versus success. I think I'm going to do that with my next pick because while the first film is masterful, its latter two sequels, I do think
do not do this.
No.
I
I'm
swear
going
to
to go
God.
with the Matrix trilogy here for my next selection.
That was going to be my next pick.
That was going to be my next pick.
Sorry, guys.
I don't miss
Sorry,
it.
guys.
Oh, I love those movies.
And I don't love the latter two movies as much. This is really me pandering to the voting body, but I do think that first film is masterful. The first film truly is great. It holds up, and obviously you can't argue its historic importance and how it changed Hollywood filmmaking. But kind of like I was saying with Batman Forever, the latter two sequels, while I don't love them, I still admire its ambition. I admire its filmmaking and its craft and what it's going for. Even if it fails, I much prefer that style of filmmaking versus cookie cutter nonsense is how you would say that.
Well, I would actually agree with that for the most part. I think up until Revolutions actually came out, The Matrix Reloaded was potentially my favorite of the three films because it had a boldness to it that I think gets undermined by Revolutions when it starts to explain everything that didn't even matter as far as what made that second film so fascinating. But I think on its own terms in a vacuum, Reloaded is a really daring sequel.
Yeah, I agree. And that boldness goes a long way for me. So even where some of it falters later on, I mean, there's still so much to love. So yeah, Matrix, my next pick here.
Honestly, I think if it wasn't for that third film not sticking the landing, I think that would have been a great trilogy because on its own terms, like I said, Reloaded, I think is a very good addition to it.
Fair. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I do not care for Revolutions, but that is a great pick. I love the Wachowskis. Very disappointed there. That was going to be my next one. But I guess I'm going to have to change course here, and I'm going to pick one of the biggest current franchises there is, and I'm going to go with Fast and Furious. The Fast and Furious.
Okay, there you go.
Damn it.
Which,
going to space.
It's going to family.
This is, it is really, the only thing you can really compare it to is Mission Impossible, where they've just continued to up the insanity with every single entry in the franchise.
Yep.
And while I do think
they're going to space.
They are past their prime right now. I did not care for Fast 8, and I really did not care for Hobbs and Shaw.
Yeah, we did not like that.
But I think that middle period from 4 to 7 are some of the best blockbusters of the last decade.
Especially 5. As we reviewed 5 earlier this year, that is one of the best heist films of the past couple of years.
Oh, so good.
And then, the first one is fun. It's a Point Break remake. It's fine. 2 is unbelievably stupid.
But it's actually kind of fun for how dumb that it is.
It is kind of fun. Yeah, just because of how stupid it is. Tokyo Drift, I think, is actually okay.
Yeah, Tokyo Drift.
I like Tokyo Drift.
Yeah, I like Tokyo Drift. There's a lot to love about that franchise. And the sincerity that Vin Diesel operates that franchise with. He just has such a love and adoration for that franchise. And in addition, the value of that franchise is that's the most diverse franchise in the world.
Yeah.
And that rocks. And so from that standpoint as well, it's a very important franchise as well. So Fast and Furious is my pick.
Jay, you don't got friends. You got family.
I got family.
You got family.
And then obviously they brought in The Rock, and it was like,
Now, yeah.
it's getting
That
real
is
now.
one of the smartest casting choices. And when he first appeared in Fast Five, he wasn't really doing his rock shtick. It was actually kind of a toned down performance, which I really respected until he got more rock-ish as the franchise went along and allowed him to do that.
He kicked a torpedo in the last film.
Yeah.
Kicked a torpedo.
When he was introduced to the Jason Statham character is when it allowed him to break loose a little bit, but I think it was the right time for it.
Jason Statham.
Yeah. Well,
Jason Statham.
Yeah, you go.
Well,
Okay, let's move on.
just into the rabbit hole. When the accents come out and the impressions come out, we'll be here for hours.
Yes, we move on.
As we snake back to me, we joked about the Fast and Furious franchise finally going to space. I'm going to go to space with my next one and boldly go where no podcast has gone before. I'm going to go with Star Trek for this next one. And I guess just as we define what a franchise is, and we sort of talked about this offline, this will include every Star Trek movie because they are in some ways, not even in some ways, in all ways, they are connected. Even the Next Generation films are directly connected to the movies that existed with the original Enterprise crew because it was a passing of the torch and a literal passing of the torch with a movie like Star Trek Generations, a movie I don't really like that much and a lot of people don't really care for. But as we sort of talked about with your pick earlier with Star Wars, Ryan, there's a notoriety with just the Star Trek name that I think will carry enough power that might help me with the potential votes. And I do really like the Star Trek franchise overall. I kind of grew up with a lot of the films, but I do think overall it is, personally a very hit or miss franchise. Quite literally, I think some of the misses are beyond bad movies, but some of the hits, I think Star Trek 2 is a great film. I think Star Trek 4 is a hilarious sci-fi comedy. And some of the more recent,
like the even numbered ones are good or something.
The general consensus, which I don't fully agree with, but a lot of people would say the even numbered ones are the better iterations of that franchise. I still like the audacity of the original film, Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which is so slow and so weird, but it's the most expensive, non-blockbuster ever made for its time that I really respected. It's very much more in the vein of 2001: A Space Odyssey. And then when you look at the newer films, started with J.J. Abrams, I like a lot of those films, but I think Star Trek Beyond is incredibly underrated. I think that really captures the charm of what Star Trek used to be and how episodic that it was. Yeah. And I would love to see it continue because of that. So the name brand, I think, is enough to, give it some warrantability. So I like it.
Yeah. No,
and that's it.
Once again, he took another pick that I was about to say. That's fine. That's fine. Brendan's just being consistent tonight. No, which is fine. I'm actually with my next pick and the final pick of the 8th round here. I'm going to go with one that no one's mentioned, but I recently rewatched on a movie marathon kind of day that they had on TV, and man, this franchise should have more entries in it. And that is Lethal Weapon. I'm going to take Lethal Weapon.
Okay. Those first two films are so good.
Yeah, that was one of mine.
Lethal Weapon, the first one, is one of, if not the best buddy cop films of all time. And then I think the sequels just elevate this relationship throughout the entirety of their run. Even something that is a little bit more tedious, like the 4th installment, when it's adding Chris Rock and Jet Li into the mix, which is unnecessary, but whatever. You still have Riggs and Murtaugh and their crazy comedy action bits that are putting it all together, sort of adding in different political statements and messages throughout the sequels. If you go back and watch them, these movies are so insane yet grounded that you just have to think that if this was made now, there's no way these movies would be made, and there's no way they would be financially successful. And there's a reason why someone like Shane Black, who wrote the original, if I'm not mistaken, he wrote The Nice Guys, and The Nice Guys is almost like the same sort of realm and extension of these characters in this franchise. And it's one part action, one part comedy, over the top villains, but a really good story in between. I love these. Yes, Mel Gibson is problematic. We talked about that with Mad Max and whatnot, but he's really great, and so is Danny Glover. You know, I'm getting too
Great
old
chemistry.
for this. You know what? I mean, it's a classic line, but I mean, beyond that, if you go and watch those movies, just watch them for movies alone. Highly entertaining, extremely hysterical. Absolutely love them.
Yep. Good pick. Love it. All right, what
It's a
you
good
got
pick.
next?
Oh, this is so tough because
You got to be speeding through these, and this is
I
where it
know,
gets hard.
I know. You're speeding me up, and it's like, oh, these are.
We
so
are at
tough
nearly
and
3
everything.
hours. We got to finish
Look,
this shit.
okay.
Ryan, you just talked for 4 minutes about Lethal Weapon. We can go.
Oh yeah, because y'all haven't talked a lot tonight.
I know.
Look,
it's fine.
I'm gonna throw out the first challenge of the night. I'm gonna do it. I'm so gonna do this because I saw this on so many lists, and I'm gonna throw this out there because I do think they at least connect because of the character itself. I am gonna go with the quote unquote Anthony Hopkins trilogy of Hannibal Lecter films because of the fact that he is playing that character.
Yeah, that counts.
Look, I like Hannibal, even though the book itself is not a perfect book and it's not nearly what Silence of the Lambs is. It's still a fun, pulpy sort of horror film. I like Red Dragon. It's not on the same level as Manhunter, but Red Dragon is a very good film with great performances, and Lecter is still great. But damn it, if I'm not going to pick this just because Silence of the Lambs has one of the all-time greatest villains ever put to film. And I think that the consistency throughout all the films in the franchise is Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. He is extraordinary every single time he's on screen. As much as I love the television series with Matt Mikkelsen, and as much as Brian Cox does a great job in Manhunter, he is the definitive actor to play this role. And look, he's won an Academy Award for it. It's one of the greatest villains of all time. I know that Jay is probably going to give me a lot of mess for it here in about 5 seconds. So I'm just going to say, I like the films. I like the movies. I'm picking it.
Okay. I got nothing for you. I finished watching Silence of the Lambs 20 minutes before we started this episode. So, I mean, I'm riding a high of Silence of the Lambs. So it's a good pick.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. The existence of Manhunter, though, is where I start to question if this is actually a franchise. And it kind of goes back to our conversation about Burton's Planet of the Apes movie and how that actually helps separate the other trilogy. But I do feel like it is so disconnected that we can look at these other 3 films, actually technically 4 films if you want to include Hannibal Rising.
No, we don't have to include that in there if we don't want to. We don't have to include anything. Well, I agree with you, Brendan, about Manhunter, but Red Dragon, the Brett Ratner film,
is literally the same story.
It's literally the same. It is the adaptation of
it's another adaptation. Yeah, but it doesn't exist in that same world that you're picking specifically here. So I get that. Right. Yeah. Okay. So I get that. So it's just snake back to you. Yeah. So it's just snake back to you, Ryan. So that means it's my turn now. And I think we're at the point now, as Jay said some time ago, that we're going to be starting to pick very imperfect franchises, but some that might be very top heavy, sometimes with a very big classic in the middle of them. And I'm going to go with another action franchise for my next pick, and it's simply because it is so incredibly top-heavy with a great first film, a mediocre second film, a third film that a lot of people love, and the rest I can take or leave, but I'm going with John McClane in the Die Hard franchise.
Yep.
And it's very top of mind because apparently there's this new ad out there for Die Hard batteries, whatever the heck that is.
So gross.
So maybe that's the only reason why I'm taking it, because it is top of mind. But at the same time, you can't ignore that first film being as iconic as it is. And Jay, we reviewed Die Hard with a Vengeance together earlier this year.
I love it.
But see, Jay and I weren't as high in it as you were, JD, but there's a lot of people out there that do feel like you do. And I think that's going to maybe help as far as me picking it here. And there are still some people that do at least appreciate the intensity of Live Free or Die Hard. I don't love that movie personally, but I think that the intensity of it is something to be warranted. Yeah, there is a fifth film there that is so unfortunate that
it does somewhat tie into the history of this show, though. We've mentioned it before, but that film was so bad that it was actually the movie that pushed us forward to start the show sooner than we were probably ready for, because we just had to talk about how bad it was.
Well, then you know what? I'm glad I picked it now.
So it was the first review we ever did on the show.
So thank you to John McClane and Hans Gruber for giving us a great first movie.
Yeah.
And hopefully
The first
that's enough.
one's great.
Hopefully that's enough to warrant some votes here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good stuff. All right, Jay.
All
what you
right.
got?
Okie dokie here. This is, man. All right. Okay. So there aren't very many documentary franchises, but I think when you can get a really classy filmmaker to make, I believe, films that really kind of, I mean, it's hard to say that these movies define humanity, but I think you could certainly make the argument that if anything defines our existence, it's the Jackass franchise. And so I am going to take the documentary trilogy Jackass.
I did not expect this ever coming.
I did not expect that either.
A collection
that's a
of
Jay
very,
pick.
very funny movies for 11-year-olds that I still find very funny. I mean, they're honestly kind of interesting because, you know, these guys are getting older and you genuinely do see them. They start hurting more. I believe in the third one, they all stayed sober because Steve-O had gone sober, and like for his sake, they all, you know, they didn't get under the influence of anything, and they are getting killed in that movie. It also features the single greatest use of 3D in film. And it's,
I agree with that.
they're just funny movies. I don't know. I mean, that's all there is to it. They're funny. Jackass, put it on the board.
There you go. All right. What do you got to say? How
Jay
interesting.
coming out swinging.
What a compelling pick. Well, I guess as I round out, what are we on? The 8th round here?
This is the 9th round, I think. Isn't
Oh
it?
yes, ninth.
This is the
Yeah.
ninth round.
This is the 9th round. So,
So you get 2 more picks right here, and then you're done.
Yeah.
Are we sure about that?
Yeah,
We are sure about that.
I can give you your list right now, and you're at number 8. The Matrix was your 8th pick.
Okay.
You had Middle Earth, Wizarding
Gotcha.
World. Yep, I can go through them all if you want.
Sure.
You had Wizarding World and Middle Earth, then the New Planet of the Apes trilogy,
Yes.
then Sam Raimi's Spider-Man,
Gotcha.
Hunger Games,
Yes.
How to Train Your Dragon,
Okay. Gotcha.
Burton and Schumacher's
Batman.
Batman,
Okay, gotcha.
and then The
All right.
Matrix.
Alrighty. So as we round out things here, then, going back to what you said there, Brendan, as far as we're getting into franchises that, are certainly going to be hit or miss. But, and that's certainly the case for my next pick, but I still really like its high highs, and even some of its lows has at least some interesting things to offer. I'm going to go with the X-Men franchise.
Okay.
I really like the first one. And I think what's interesting about the first one, this doesn't get talked about enough, but there's not really a ton of action in that first one. And the action we do get is pretty subtle, or it's pretty quick and brief. That's really an exercise in mood and tone and character establishing, which I find really interesting. The second film, I haven't seen it in a while, but that was always my favorite anyway of that original trilogy. And the third film is something that exists. And then you get to, First Class, which I really liked. I thought that was really great. And Days of Future Past, it certainly has its flaws, but it has some of my favorite moments of the entire franchise.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that Xavier scene is breathtaking to me. And nobody talks about John Ottman as a composer often, but that piece of music he makes for that scene is one of the most poignant I've heard in recent years. It is really, really great. I love the score for that film quite a lot. And I just think as a story, it's fascinating, it's dramatic, it's thrilling, and just overall riveting, even with its flaws. I love it. Apocalypse, bad, but you still have Oscar Isaac, so that's a slight plus. It's a slight plus, even if he gives a bad performance.
That's fair.
And I'm apparently the only one that appreciates moral ambiguity, because that's all Dark Phoenix is about.
That is true.
There's
You are
no-
the only person who appreciates that. That is a good point.
I still have yet to see it, so maybe
that on an
I would
InSession
appreciate
film
just as
t-shirt.
much.
I will go to
JD
bat
West
for
wanted
it.
to be
That's a film similar to the first one in that it's not interested in action. There's hardly any in the film. It's a series of scenes that is wrestling with moral ambiguity and moral consciousness and where characters sit on that scale. And I find that compelling. I much prefer that than just action, 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 action all the time. But apparently I'm the only one that feels that way. So, but there is that. So it's a franchise that has, it's a mixed bag, but I really like a lot of what the franchise has to offer. In particular,
Fair.
First Class, Days of Future Past, the first two. I would still argue those four are at the very least, good, if not quite good. So, and for the ninth round, where we're at now, I'll take it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's
fair.
certainly fair. And I think a lot of people are thinking about it too, because it does have some reputation as far as a movie that did help kind of kickstart the superhero phase in what we know it to be now. And I think that is that first X-Men movie. Whether it holds up or not, I think is beside the point. But at the time, it was new and different and self-serious. And that's what made it kind of special at the time.
Yeah. And I think it will foster some votes. So I'm going
Hopefully.
with it there.
Or hopefully not.
Well, my last selection here, I don't know if it will foster any votes aside from, the few cinephiles that love this series as I do, but the trip to Spain, the trip to Italy, the trip to Greece is my last selection here. I love these series of films. Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon traveling, eating food, accents, imitations. Oh, it is so glorious. I love it. And it's not just gimmicks and goofy camaraderie the whole time. I mean, these series, especially in the latter films, do have a humanity to them that juxtaposes a lot of the tomfoolery that goes on when they're just goofing around. And I love that balance in these films. They're really, really great. So
Ryan is not happy right now.
I just feel like
Sorry.
a moron. I totally forgot.
I did.
about
I
that.
totally blanked and forgot.
And
about
I love that pick. Oh my God.
That's a great pick.
Such an idiot. God.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
This is where
it.
it gets hard. We all have one pick left, and it's gotta matter. It's gotta matter.
It's gotta matter. All
So
right.
that's where I'm at. Those are my 10.
I hate you, JD.
You're welcome.
Oh boy. All right. We got some man, I could go a lot of different directions here because I'm not incredibly in love with any of the ones that I have sitting in front of me here. But since
Some
have
other
to make
people
a
might
choice,
be. That's the thing.
yeah, that is true. I'm going to go with a series of movies that I recently ran through and actually had one of the few new releases of this year, which I think is the worst movie in the series, although a lot of people seem to really enjoy it just for the feel-good elements of it. But I'm going to go with Bill and Ted, the Bill and Ted trilogy.
Oh, okay.
I really like both of the first two Bill and Ted movies. Bogus Journey is a wild, wild movie. It's so much fun. And the first one is, I talked about Back to the Future being this really tightly told time travel story. Bill and Ted, not so much that. It's just a bunch of like fun vignettes. But man, is that movie so fun. And Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves have such incredible chemistry. Alex Winter is so good throughout all of those movies. He really outacts Keanu in Bill and Ted 3. But a really, really fun, nostalgic trilogy that I really enjoy. So I'm going Bill and Ted.
Of course, the person that just picked Jackass would be the one to also pick Bill and Ted.
I'm going pretty highbrow with my final.
It's got to have its consistency.
Yeah. And it's my turn for the last pick here as far as my list. I know we're going long here, but I think I need a moment of silence for every remaining option I don't pick here. And I might just have to stare at my list of potentials for at least 5 minutes before I settle on one, because we are at such a man. All of these I feel like are in equal measure, but I'm gonna have to go with. I don't know what I have to go with. This sucks, man. This sucks.
It gets hard.
This sucks. Great idea to do movie franchise.
Shrek.
I'm not going with Shrek. I am not going with Shrek, honestly.
Donkey.
In hindsight, I probably should versus the rest of these picks I have listed here.
Boots.
You know what? I am gonna go a little bit overseas. I'm gonna go with another one of my guts, and I'm gonna represent overseas a little bit because we haven't really done that much with a lot of these lists. A lot of these are very American franchises, and I'm gonna go with a person that many people think is sort of the modern Charlie Chaplin of his era when it comes to martial arts, and that's Police Story. So I'm going to go with Police Story for my next pick here.
Okay.
Bit of an out-of-the-box pick here when it comes to Jackie Chan, but at least those first two films, and then even the fun aspects of Super Cop afterwards.
I was like, I thought there were only two. I forgot about Super
No,
Cop.
there's Super Cop, and they just even announced another one coming out pretty soon, I think next year.
Yeah.
So there is something top of mind about it, which hopefully does help me out.
Police Story 1 rocks. That movie rules.
That mall fight is one of the greatest things I've seen.
Unbelievable. The stunts. Yeah. Like there's a guy that just jumps out of a bus onto concrete from like 15 feet up. I have no idea how they did that.
It's incredible.
Unless he just fell onto concrete from 15 feet up. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it might
we did our top 3 Jackie Chan scenes on a previous show. That was a ton of fun to do.
Oh, yeah.
What a fun
we talked
week
about that
was.
scene specifically, too.
Yeah. It was incredible.
Yeah, but yeah, for those reasons, I need to change it up a little bit. It'll probably be something that loses me votes because it is so out of the box. But I felt guilty leaving it off. I really did.
Good stuff. Yeah. All right, Ryan.
Oh,
final pick.
Oh my God, this is. Oh God. Okay. All right. I'm not gonna go with. I'm not gonna go with anything very auteur here. I think I did a fair representation of that in the past drafts. People know my stances on that, and I'm not really going to go there. I'm going to try to go with something here that I think people truly underestimate, which is sort of the surprise. And I'm going to go with something here that no one would probably pick, but I'm going to do it. And look, I like it when a director takes some risks and surprises the hell out of me. And I think one of the biggest surprises I had in theaters over the last couple of years was a couple of years ago when I was towards the end of this horror movie, and I sort of realized, oh my God, this is a continuation of a movie that I had no idea was even going to be continued. I am going to take the Unbreakable trilogy. I'm going to take Unbreakable.
I almost took that, actually.
And I'm going to take Glass because, look, say what you want about him.
Glass is not that bad of a movie, man.
No, it's
Glass
not.
is good.
Yeah, Glass
I think
is
Split
good.
is the worst of that trilogy.
And,
I agree, actually.
And you know what? I got to say this. I know people want to give M. Night Shyamalan all the hate in the world, and maybe he deserves some of it. Sometimes he doesn't. But for me, I've always had a soft spot for M. Night Shyamalan. I always have. Like, he is a guy that I've always just sat there and I've just been, look, you guys have put way too much expectations on this guy. He's just making things that are within his wheelhouse, and he's very successful at it. He is very successful at it. And Unbreakable is one of the best films he's ever made. If not, dare I say, the best film he's ever made. And then Split, I like Split. I don't think it's 100% great, but that twist, I mean, that twist alone bumps it up a star, in my opinion, because I just had no idea that thing was coming. And then Glass is a wonderful, I think, sort of deconstruction. I didn't like it at first, but I think
it's
it is
an anti-superhero movie.
Yeah, it's
cool
a really
deconstruction
cool of the superhero movies we see now. It's a movie that I've reassessed in the pandemic because it's been on HBO.
It's exceptionally stupid, but
yeah,
it is.
But what are superhero movies if not sometimes exceptionally stupid, right? And I think that M. Night's a very smart director in taking on this. This is a passion project too. I always champion passion projects, and so yeah, I'm going to take the Unbreakable trilogy.
Okay, good stuff. I mean, I really. Sorry, did you want to say something?
No. Draft over. Draft complete.
Yep. Draft is over. Yep. I think we're all done here. Real quick though, do you guys want to round your 10 real fast? Just real fast.
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that. Here, I'll run through them here. So Ryan's 10. Ryan has Star Wars, James Bond, John Wick, The Godfather, Rocky, Pirates of the Caribbean, Bourne, Lethal Weapon, Hannibal, and Unbreakable. Pretty solid squad there. Brendan has Toy Story, Mission Impossible, Dark Knight. Oof, that's a heavy hitters there. At the top three.
That's.
And then we got Man with No Name trilogy, The Muppets, the Before trilogy, Scream, Star Trek, Die Hard, and Police Story. I have Indiana Jones, Mad Max, Alien, Evil Dead, Oceans, the Oceans trilogy plus Oceans 8, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Back to the Future, Fast and Furious, Jackass, and Bill and Ted. And JD has just coming out hot with this fantasy doubleheader here. Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. He has the Matt Reeves Planet of the Apes trilogy. He has the Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, the Hunger Games, How to Train Your Dragon, the Burton Schumacher Batman films, the Matrix, X-Men, and The Trip. So those are who we got. Some good groups there.
Should we quickly mention some stuff that just missed our list?
Well, at 3 hours, I'm not sure if we should.
No one. I'm just surprised you didn't take Transformers, JD.
Well, that would have been
Boys.
purely.
I'm surprised he didn't take Bad Boys. That was the one.
They were on my list, but that would have been purely subjective. I don't know if they would have fostered any more votes than what I picked. So
the big ones that were left off were what? Like Jurassic Park, Terminator,
Men in Black, maybe.
Men in Black,
Superman,
Austin Powers.
Austin Powers, Kung Fu Panda,
Superman. If you want to go maybe through like some of the more artistic ones, the Apu trilogy, the Three Colors trilogy, the Decalogue,
Jumanji.
Jumanji. DCU, Nowhere to Be Seen. Sorry, Snyder fans.
JD, The Mighty Ducks.
Yeah, never gonna pick it.
Quack.
Dirty Harry.
Okay, well,
we're done.
That rounds out episode 400, the draft. As Ryan mentioned earlier, we will put out the poll on Twitter, so you can stay tuned for that and cast your vote for the person you think had the best draft. Before we round everything out here, though, we have one more quick thing to talk about. Brendan, let's talk about this week's poll.
Let's go ahead and talk about this week's poll. And on the subject of movie franchises, we decide to ask all of you out there, what is your favorite movie franchise? And we sort of veered away from some of the rules that we put in place. I simply put some of the trilogies as far as these options were concerned, and not all of the films. For instance, like when you think of things like Harry Potter and even Lord of the Rings. But with all that said, before reading all of these options, which I'm not going to do simply for the sake of time, I will just get right to the results here. Winning the poll at just over 15%, and it was a very close call for a lot of these. The Lord of the Rings trilogy comes out on top here at just over 15%.
I'll take that.
Just over 14% here was the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
All right.
Good job, Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Way to do it. Way to take down the giant.
Yeah.
Good job.
Coming in at third place, 13%. Star Wars, the entire Star Wars saga there. So good pick on you there, Ryan, when it comes to doing that one first.
Very good. I'll take top three.
Toy Story comes in at fourth place at just over 7%.
Hey, all of those four are occupied by different people in our draft.
They are. So it's a nice diversification when it comes to what we all picked here. But we did get quite a bit of love for a lot of these other ones. Mission Impossible, Jurassic Park, James Bond, The Hunger Games, Harry Potter. In fact, interestingly, all of these ones I just mentioned all had the same number of votes. So it was almost like a 7-way tie for 5th place here, which was really interesting. That also included the Dark Knight trilogy and Back to the Future.
Good stuff. All righty. Well, thanks to everyone that voted on the poll. We really do appreciate it. We've gone really long here. Before we get to the closing, I do want to make a quick announcement that we are going to, for the podcast, you're going to get this in 2 parts.
Yeah.
We will release it on the same day, but I will split it into 2 shows. So just, be aware of that. All right. So with that said, we'll round out this week's show. Please follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're pretty active there. You can follow us on Letterboxd. Letterboxd.com/InSessionFilm is a great way to get a hold of us. You can also email the show. Email us any feedback you have. Again, that email is InSessionFilm@gmail.com.
And you can also subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud. And as we mentioned earlier, leave us a review on iTunes. We may even read it on the show if it's worth noting. Our podcasts are also syndicated every week at geekcastradio.com and the Lamb Podcast Network. And you can also check out our Listen Now page by going to InSessionFilm.com/listen-now.
And of course, the InSession Film podcast is supported by our great listeners like you. As we mentioned earlier, if you want to help us, leave us a review on iTunes. You can check us out on Patreon. And again, it's patreon.com/InSessionFilm. Go to the website, InSessionFilm.com. There we have other bonus content. We have the InSession Film store if you want a t-shirt, such as one that Jay is wearing tonight for the video YouTube viewers out there. You can get one just like that. So head on over to InSessionFilm.com to check all of that out. All right, guys, let's get to final thoughts before we get out of here. We'll start with you, Ryan. Any final thoughts on anything before
Nope, we're going to start with me. My final thoughts are the Braves are tied 3-3 in the 7th inning of the National Championship Series.
I'm surprised you weren't distracted.
Yeah.
Did you just
I thought Jay just left.
Jay just left. Yeah.
He must have done something by accident. I do not think that was intentional.
I think that was so intentional, and he was waiting for the moment to do it. You have no idea what he did the other night when that happened. So hopefully that does not come back to bite him.
Oh, what a funny guy.
Okay, so Ryan, back to you.
As for my final thoughts, good Lord. I want to say that there have been a lot of great films that I've seen this year already. I was taking part this weekend in the Middleburg Film Festival, and for my final thought, I want to talk about something that was going on the internet, and I didn't really get to talk about this on Extra Film, but I'll make it really quick. Any publication out there that decides to write an op-ed piece or an article about canceling the Oscars because there's not enough films out there and not enough blockbusters in particular,
you're not watching enough movies.
I'm going to tell you flat out, I do not want you at any critic screenings for the rest of your life. I don't want you to write about things anymore or talk about things because you obviously don't understand or know anything about the year of cinema that we've had and how much of a disrespectful slap in the face that is to a ton of directors, especially in a year dominated by people of color and female directors. Shame on the Washington Post. Shame on anyone that actually think that that is a good idea. I'm so tired of hearing that tired old rhetoric. This has been an extraordinary year for film, and we need something like the Oscars. That can be something
we need a distraction. We need something to celebrate.
We need something to celebrate.
Give Kelly Reichardt an Oscar.
Exactly. We need good things to happen. And as somebody that covers it on Chasing the Gold and all this stuff, and I have tons of people that are coming on, the Oscars are going to happen. So your op-ed pieces, save them for next year, or save them for a rainy day when it doesn't happen. Or you know what? Stop being so damn negative and just face the fact it's going to happen, and we'll see it. You know, it's what I've always said. It's easier to be negative than it is to be positive, and that's exactly what that is. Shame, shame, shame on releasing that.
It's not a perfect opportunity, though, which I'll kind of use that as a transition to my final thoughts here, is that to see people like a Kelly Reichardt, for instance, get a either an Oscar nomination or maybe even an Oscar win. You would hope to see that in a year that is, you know, as bountiful as any other year, regardless of a pandemic. That's what you would hope to see, which is why Parasite winning Best Picture in a year that still didn't have these new rules in place is one of the best things that we could ever see. Yeah. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you should disregard those movies. And that's where it gets really troublesome, because I'm with you, Ryan. We still need to see this just for the sake of our own sanity as people who love movies. Let's celebrate something that at least still
if we can have,
that we at least still got to see.
Celebrate.
Brendan, if we can still have sports, and we can
why can't we celebrate movies?
And we can have the Emmys. Why can't we have the Oscars? It's such a dumb argument.
Honestly, I couldn't care less about what that ceremony looks like as long as the celebration happens.
Exactly.
And not to mention, this could be a year. Well, Ryan, maybe you can correct me if I'm way off here. I mean, and we haven't seen Soul yet. Wolfwalkers, I think, has a great shot at maybe stealing that category.
Yeah.
And we haven't seen something like that in a long time.
I mean,
It's so good.
JD, I've seen it, and it's impeccable, and I agree with you. I mean, this is a year where JD and Jay might have to eat their words, because we've always talked about the Oscars having certain films and they fit in this box, and our InSession film awards don't usually overlap with them. This might be the one year, JD, where the InSession film awards could overlap a ton with the Oscars.
Yeah.
And for that's so exciting, especially just for me, because it's like, you're telling me that the quality that I love personally could match the quality that maybe the Academy could bring, especially with the films that I've seen that are quote unquote the front runners. Sign me up for that. Sign me up for that reality. If I mean, that's a reality I want to live in, and we should live in.
What if this is a reality where a movie like Dick Johnson Is Dead warrants a Best Director nomination?
Oh, I mean,
yes.
Or what if this is the year where something like we obviously had Parasite, but we had The Farewell miss out last year. What if something like Minari won Best Picture, or Nomadland, or One Night in Miami, or so many other extraordinary films?
And it's simply because they're potentially great movies. It's not just about
the merit behind them. Yeah. Even something like The Trial of Chicago 7, like that's a better movie than some of the other middle of the road ones that has come out in the past. And say what you want, it's got great performances and a great script from Aaron Sorkin, like they always do. Like he always delivers, in it, man.
I'm lesser on the film than everyone else here, but I think there's still a lot of good things in it.
Yeah. So, and
I like it better than Green Book.
Exactly. There you go. So, hey, I think that's a great way to end episode 400. By the way, just saying, Trial of Chicago 7, better than Green Book.
I have no final thoughts. I was more or less going to say the same thing on that.
Okay, well, a quick story, and I wanted to tie this into what we did as far as franchises go. I mentioned Harry Potter earlier. Obviously, we had some fun talking about it. There's a scene in Harry Potter, a lot of you guys may remember, where Harry pretends to give Ron a potion before their Quidditch match, right? And he goes out there.
That's in the Half-Blood Prince.
Yes. Plays this amazing match. He's really good. And it turns out it was all kind of a trick, right? Like here, he didn't really do it. He was capable of doing it, is all I said. That was me earlier this week, twice actually, when I was playing hockey at our local ice rink here, where I played out of my goddamn mind. I have not played this good in years.
You're so proud of yourself. I love it.
The whole time I was like, what did Brandy do? She put something in my coffee, did something. There's something weird going on here, and I want to know what's happening. That was all I could think about after watching that movie. It was in my head thinking, I'm just waiting for the shoe to drop. I'm just waiting for the spell to kind of fizzle out, because what's going on here? And it never did. I mean, I twice in a row, it was the best I played in a long time, and it was very exciting. And I think, like Ron, it was maybe all in my head. We'll see if it continues or not. But it was very exciting, and it was good enough.
Good for you, man.
That another player there asked me to be on his beer league team next month.
Good. Just don't hurt your knee again.
Yeah, well, and that's another thing. My knee it feels the strongest it's been in a long, long time.
Good. So the physical therapy.
Knock on wood.
Yes.
Knock on wood.
Knock on wood. Yeah, I say that, and the next time I'm going to be limping out here for the next show. I know. Yeah. Anyway, thanks to everyone for tuning in. If you watch this entire thing,
we love you.
God bless you. You are the most amazing people on the planet. Hopefully, a lot of you catch this in hindsight on YouTube over the course of the next days and months. And like I said, we'll split this up for the audio listeners in podcast. Thanks, gentlemen, for joining me. For the record, Jay never came back. He just fully left.
He fully has to watch the last two innings of the Braves and Dodgers, which they may or may not win.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You gotta love Jay. Gotta love him.
Movies.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast.